All right, we're going to call this meeting into order. And Marnie, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Mark Gregg.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Jolin. Here. Councilmember Henry Rosenthal. Yes. Vice Mayor Sharon Mahoney.
Here.
And Mayor Betty Pinder.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, Chief, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right. We'll just have a short, quick prayer here and we'll get rolling. Lord, we just thank you for this beautiful day that you have made. We just ask that you would look after us and lead and guide and direct us in all that we do. And we pray for blessings over each council person this evening and their families and all the staff that is here, all the public that's here and those that are watching. We just pray blessings over them and over the city of Alamorada. Just lead us and guide us and direct us in all that we do. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay. Public comment is now open. Marnie, do we have anybody signed up?
Yes, we do. First up is Don Horton.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. For the record, I'm Don Horton, 47 Schooner Bay Road. There was a lot of talk yesterday related to legal services and the costs. And after studying the information given to us yesterday, you'll find that the amount that was paid out during Roger's employment totaled up to almost as much as what is being proposed in this budget for the coming fiscal year by Weiss Sirota. Fiscal year ending in 22 cost the village $628,252 with an in-house attorney. Of course, that number doesn't include the continuing education, the computer, a car, the fuel, and so many other hidden costs that are squirreled away in a government budget. I'm not exactly sure when Roger left, but I'd also bet that that didn't include his exit payout. I don't believe he had 11 lawsuits. So if you look at the budget from Weiss Sirota, the proposed budget, at $755,000, that number is all inclusive. That's a car, computers, IT people, and a pool of awesome municipal, HR, and other professionals. Also, keep in mind that you approve our agenda at the beginning of our meetings. So I'd ask that you stick to the agenda. So many people complain about how long meetings last. But if you've got one shot at public comment, then I would say stick to that agenda and leave that alone. I don't think this is a discussion. This is a presentation that we all need to listen to. So thank you.
Thank you, Don. Who's next, Marnie?
Van Cadenhead.
Afternoon, I'm Van Cadenhead from Alamorada. Well, we're back here again, once again to the budget workshop. And every year, it seems like Henry and I ask for rollback. Because if we do rollback, you give the people that pay your salaries a break. And even with rollback, we're still going to have a healthy, tidy sum. And we're just not going to have quite as much excess extravagance and ability to spend money. So I would ask you to seriously consider the rollback number that's in front of you. And 3.0 is the highest we can go. And clearly, I think you would agree that that's not necessary. And the number that we had for this year was sufficient. But unfortunately, for the people that live here, our taxable ad valorem value of the 4 islands of Alamorada has gone from $1.1 billion to $6.5 billion. And last year it was $5.7 billion, which means that in 1 year we have accumulated $730 million worth of material growth on these 4 little islands. And to me, that's it's nice for people that are wanting to see their property values increase, but for people that want to live here and work here and have their families here and have a reasonable economy based on a egalitarian spread of visitors, not just 5-star, top of the line Condé Nast visitors, then I think you should consider rollback and give the people of Islamorada a break, because the accretion we've had in the last year of our taxable ad valorem value, it's appalling, it's obscene, and it's totally unsustainable. So thank you very much.
All right, Marnie, who's next?
Next, Joe Wishmeyer.
Yes, Joe Wishmeyer, Plantation Key. Mr. Mayor and Council, I am speaking today to implore you to lower the proposed millage rate of 3 mills. Taxable value in the village was up $729 million with no help from Legoland, Sun Country. At a rate of 3 mills, village revenue would be up over 18%. I am sure that citizens' income did not come close to that amount. Maybe if you didn't spend over like $1.7 million on pavilions, when a large thatch hut and restrooms would have sufficed and served the purpose, our rate could be lower. With the current general fund balance ending 9/30/24 at $15,530,126 at a millage rate of 2.78 last year, where is the necessity to raise the rate to 3? At that proposed rate, it appears that the general fund balance at 9/30/25 would be up to $18,964,980. Why must the residents be held responsible to increase the village's bank account by more than $3 million? By going to the rollback rate of 2.52 means the projected general fund rate for 9/30/25 would still increase by over $400,000. As Mayor Pinder said at yesterday's meeting, you all were elected to represent the public. With an increase in taxable value of $729 million, do the responsible thing for those of us struggling to maintain our residences in the village that we chose. Spending has gotten out of control in the village, while citizens have had to tighten up our belts to make ends meet. So should you. With only 7,000 residents in our small village, a budget of over $24 million seems very excessive. How does that compare to other small communities? Help us survive and don't just pad the village bank account. Lastly, at a public meeting, in a public place, you should allow public to speak. We sit here or watch on Zoom for hours and hours because we care. So the least you can do is listen to us for 3 minutes on certain important issues. Thank you.
Yes, we have, next up is Sue Miller.
Sue Miller, Lower Matacumbe. Today, you're going to talk about millage rates. The staff presented you with the effect of different millage rates. I created a chart from the staff scenarios to make it simpler. You heard eloquent presentations from department heads about improvements they hope to make. No members of the public who will pay for the added costs were invited to provide their ideas. Some residents might like a tax break, some extra money for groceries. As a council, you continually discuss the priority concerns that will end up as significant future costs to our community, not really optional costs, but necessary costs, like potential cost of takings claims. Just weeks ago, you discussed having a new budget line item for land acquisition and taking cost. It's not in this budget. Workforce housing, no single mention of workforce housing in the budget. All businesses have difficulty finding employees, not just the village. Why not budget some funds to subsidize rents instead of building more housing that really hasn't proven to be effective enough? Check my chart that I've provided. None of the millage scenarios provided to you by the staff impacted the requests the department heads made yesterday. All scenarios include the salary increases, all include the new projects proposed yesterday. None alter the funding available for hurricane recovery. They only change the fund balance left at the end of the year, September 2025. At 3 mills, a fund balance will be $18,965,000. At 2.9527 mills, the millage approved by you last September, a fund balance of $18,678,000. At 2.5297 mills, the rollback rate, a fund balance of $15,985,000. The fund balance you approved last September was $14.6 million. Isn't $15.98 million enough this year? You can still give the employees all the added funds they asked for yesterday. At rollback, $9.7 million of an almost $16 million in fund balance is restricted to hurricane recovery, leaving $6 million for a rainy day, one less severe than a hurricane. You could even restrict some of that $6 million to land acquisition and workforce rent subsidies. One more thing. Lack of public participation. I hope one day Alamorada will understand that government works better when there is transparency and robust public involvement. Thank you very much.
Marnie, is there anybody else?
Yes, I have a caller on Zoom. Let me pull her up. Okay. Caller with the last four numbers of 0139. Go ahead.
Hi, this is Joan Scholes. Thank you, Council. And thank you, Sue Miller, for breaking down the mills in logical ways. I'm going to echo many of the other presenters and just say that I think we should go with the rollback, and I think we should have every real estate property pay their fair share of taxes, including fund communities. Thank you.
Anybody else, Marnie?
No, sir, that's it.
Public comment. Go ahead, Henry. Public comment is now closed. Henry wants to say something.
Some time ago, the manager put out a statement every week as to where we are with different projects, et cetera, et cetera. I was probably the first to recommend to him to publicize that, and you did, to the great appreciation from a lot of people. Recently, you said this: please mark your calendars for our budget meetings scheduled for Wednesday, August 21 through Friday, August 23. These sessions will include a financial overview, department head presentations, support of their year-end 24-25 budget requests. All members of the Alamorada community are welcome and encouraged to watch online and attend in person. The primary budget hearing will take place, etc., on September the 5th. What I'm emphasizing is the statement: all members of the Alamorada community are welcome and encouraged to watch online or attend in person. Very well said. However, once attending in person, they're not allowed to talk. Oh, they got 3 minutes at the top, but that's it. I'm proposing a situation where public comment be after the council discusses a topic. Then when the public makes a comment, they have a background other than a printed word to talk about it. I have been proposing public comment over 4 years. The mayor had a problem at the last meeting. His intention was to follow the outline. That's right. And the outline of the staff. I suggest to you, buddy, that you be the last person to look at that outline, that you participate in that outline.
The
Agenda, okay. I don't know if you're going to be here next year, and if you are, I don't know if you're going to be mayor or not, but any future mayors should be a part of that agenda. You should have the last word, not the staff, not the manager, not the council, you. You're over everybody. I just want to bring it out because I think you're entitled to do that, and you should do that. So that's my statement. I strongly suggest that we make an arrangement of some kind where the public can speak throughout this meeting to address whatever we're talking about. They're not really informed. They don't know what we're going to say. Are they going to object to something that I'm going to say? Let them say it. They're not going to object to it before I say it, that's for sure. Once again, I have changed my vote several times, not several times, twice, as a matter of fact, over 4 years, because of the public. Something that was said that I was not aware of. So I'm very much in favor of the public speaking, not only 3 minutes at the top of the meeting, but throughout the meeting. It doesn't have to be on every subject, and I don't know if we're governed by the 3 minutes or not, but it doesn't have to be 3 minutes. We had a mayor one time that was going to have the public comment for 30 minutes, and that was it, because he felt the meetings were going too damn long. I don't care how long the meetings go, as long as the public has the input. They are the boss of this town, not the 5 of us. Those people out there are the boss, and I want to hear from them. And I don't want them to be restricted throughout the meeting, that they can't make a comment, and we have to vote for the next person to get up and talk. So I've said it. I've said it for 4 years. I've said it again. I got a couple more meetings to go, and I hope I don't have to say it again. Those are the important people.
Okay, so Henry, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Okay, every meeting.
I'm sorry.
Okay, Van, we'll take care of it, okay? You don't have to holler. Please, be calm, cool. No, be calm, cool, and collective, Van. I've been very gracious with you for a long time, man, and you're not going to sit here and holler like you did at Vice Mayor Mahoney a couple weeks ago. You need to show some respect to us, man, as well. All right, so Henry, when we have a regular council meeting on a Tuesday and a Thursday, they can speak after every tab. On the agenda, it is after there's a public comment on every single tab, okay? So if there's 10 tabs, that one person sits here and speaks on every tab, can speak for 30 minutes. So I can't say, I can't agree with you that we don't allow public comment. Now, our attorney says, and you know as well as me, that when we did budget workshops, we have public comment, just like it's the third item on the agenda today, but this is a time for us to talk amongst each other and our staff, but they have time in the very beginning. There is public comment. They can speak about anything they want, okay? But to sit here and just comment every time, okay, when it's in a workshop that we're trying to get things done, I disagree with you. The regular council meeting and the land use, I agree with you. They can talk. Okay, they should be allowed to talk every tab. And they do. Okay, and we used to let people just raise their hand, but we had to have some order because it just gets like, people just want to, they talk and then they want to talk again. So I've been to meetings for years with the Florida Keys Aqueduct. They get one shot to talk, okay? And I know this isn't aqueduct, but you know what? We got to have some uniform. When we put a moratorium on permits, or we've put something, no more new administrative release. What are these people going to say if we vary, we come back, somebody comes in here and they want to come and scream at us about, well, we got to give them their administrative relief. What's the difference? What's good for the goose is good for the gander, the way I feel. Okay? And I mean, we all see through different islands, and we can all agree that we disagree. So.
Your point is well taken, and I appreciate what you're saying. However, the manager sent out this welcome. All members of the Islamorada community are welcome and encouraged to watch online or attend in person.
Hey.
Attend in person. Why would anybody attend in person to sit here and listen to us and not be a part of that conversation? If you invited the public to your house and you show them
Go ahead, Mr.
America's Got Talent, for lack of a better, right? You've invited these people to our house. And they're going to sit there and they're going to watch us talk about things, but they can't have anything to say about it. I'm talking about this meeting now. I'm not talking about the regular meetings that you spoke of. I'm in agreement with you there.
Okay.
But I'm just talking about here. I said it last meeting. These people took the time to leave their house, get in their car, drive here with the anticipation of being a part of this meeting, and they can't talk. They can't say anything. So that's my position. I don't know what the cure is. You run the show. Run the show for the public as well as ourselves, okay? That's all I ask.
Okay. So go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yeah, Henry, thanks for your commentary. It looks like right here on our agenda that there is provision for the group to change the meeting format and to have discussion. I know that because we've learned over the years here that we create the meeting schedule, we as an organization, as a council, so we can change that if we want. We should, and I appreciate having the conversation now instead of in the middle of the meeting where there's confusion. It says that a consensus of council is required to reopen public comment. Can I suggest that before we get into the meat of this discussion, that we decide as a group if we want to allow public comment on one or two other occasions, and then just end the conversation and move on with the meeting? So maybe we can have that conversation now. Does that work for everyone?
Well, first of all, I have to apologize. This is the first time I've seen the agenda. And the reason it's the first time is when I walked out of the house about a half hour ago, if it's there.
That folder you have is not what we're on tonight.
This is for tomorrow?
That's
See how much I know. I don't even know what the hell it is.
That's okay.
That's the 501c3s that we talked about in their presentation.
All right. So I apologize to everybody for my language and being late and everything else.
But additionally, your point is well taken. It's a workshop, and it's important. We're spending millions of dollars, and just to weigh in, and then let's maybe just move it along. I am happy to hear another round of public comment at some point in here. Let's insert it. And there we go. I mean, anywhere in the meeting, but let's decide now rather than in the middle of the meeting.
But we make, Elizabeth, policies and procedures and regulations, and then we never follow them. Why do you have policies and regulations and procedures or standard operating procedure, but you never follow them, okay? And that's how chaos happens. Right. You even get upset over it sometimes, and you want to call point of order what we're doing, but it's because things start getting all over the place. Either we follow what we should do, okay? I mean, hey.
That's why I'm suggesting let's figure it out now before our meeting starts. If we're going to open, if we want to have it, let's put it in here and insert it so we have an expectation, and then let's move on, and then we'll follow it.
I would just like to say we have a time limit on this meeting. We're bookended at 6 o'clock. We can have as much or as little as you want. I don't care. I like it too, but figure out how to do both.
I'd like to say another thing. You're very familiar with South Florida Water Management. I go to their meetings, you know what? 3 minutes, you got to sit down. And they don't let you come back again unless it's on a separate tab, okay? So
Sharon, you're good at the neutral, the middle of the road thing. Why don't you suggest a solution to this, and then so we can move it along?
What I would say is that this has clearly been a problem. It has. But it's also been a problem that we imposed. So to me, the solution is that whether this council or the next council deals with it, it has to be readdressed. It just does, because no one's happy. I agree with you, Elizabeth, that let's insert it in tonight's meeting so we can move on. But, you know, we do get blamed when we don't do something, when we do something. So this, obviously, I know Henry hasn't been happy with it, and sometimes I'm not happy that they should have input, but this is really our decision, our problem. So my suggestion would be for whether the next council or this council changes the way it's done, so it is followed as procedure. I mean, it's only fair.
let me ask you got everybody a question up here. I got phone calls today, and people said, we voted you in office to represent us. All 5 of us were represented by the residents. And you know what? They said, if there's a problem, Mr. Pender, we will be there. We're going to come and speak, okay? But if there's not a problem, we're relying on you and the 4 other council people to make decisions, okay? So obviously it's not everybody in the village is unhappy because our room could be overflowing like it was with Jillian at the thing. But obviously, and I've been to many meetings that they couldn't even let the general public, all the general public speak. So, because there were so many people here, they had to cut it off. Okay, when Publix was going on, we were here until midnight when Publix grocery store. So if I've had many people call me and say, you know what? You're doing a good job. We think the council's doing a good job. And you know what? Hey, if there's an issue, we will show up. And we'll show up in numbers, and we'll let you know. But if not, but I don't see us having 100 people here every meeting to coming, all 100 people are sitting here complaining how bad we are.
Buddy, everybody's opinion is important. Go ahead, Sharon.
No, let's just agree that this needs to be readdressed, whether it's by this council, the next council, but let's just move on with this tonight. Well, I do, because I know you don't.
I hear about this council.
I do too, Henry, but I'm not saying not to let him talk. You're not listening. And the point is, this is a problem that we have instituted. If we want to change it, then we need to change it. Okay, let's change it, add it in, and let's move on. Can that be?
Where do you want to add it in?
How can we address these people that took the time?
I get it. I get it. I get it.
After C. Let's just add public comment after C.
You want to
Can
do
agree
that?
on that? I'm
After
perfect.
where?
After C.
Is that agreeable?
I'm happy with that.
Is everybody okay with that?
Wait a minute, what C are you talking?
C is millage rate discussion with alternate scenarios.
On the script sheet, on the script handout. Yeah.
On the script, that's not, there
Right
you
here
go.
on the agenda, Mark.
Yeah. And that gives everybody the chance. And again, this is something that has to change, Henry. And I agree it has to be changed. But he's trying to stick to what we've decided on. And we do keep jumping around and changing it. And we have to have consistency.
We voted on
So let's
all
change
this
it.
when Brian was here from the
Fine.
county. We
Okay, let's move
restructured.
on.
People got to sign up. They got to sign up before the tab starts and all that. You got to have some kind of uniform.
Let's.
Okay, so what are we going to do?
After
Is there a
C.
consensus
Yes.
of at least 3 of us that want to
Yes.
do this after
Yes.
C?
Fine.
Yep.
Okay.
4.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
Okay, so we're going to do public comment then, okay, for 3 minutes, all right? And this is only at this meeting we're deciding this. We're not changing our policy right here, okay? At this meeting, we're going to do public comment here, okay? And the reason I got upset last night is because I'm only following the script, the agenda that I was given. And you know what? When all 5 of us started our meeting and nobody speaks up and says, I have an emergency addition or deletion, and then all of a sudden we deviate from our, you guys want me to deviate from our script? Come on.
I want you to be the last guy seeing the script, and you okay it. That's what I want. The last guy. You got the power to be the.
I understand that, Henry, but there's 5 of us, and if there's a
All
consensus,
right,
it ain't gonna matter.
Guys, you
So
ever
this
heard the
is
story
done.
about beating the dead horse?
Okay.
Let's move on.
Let's go ahead and start with A then.
We did get something.
Yes, we did.
Mr. Mayor and Council, I think we always forget, some of us forget, that, public comment is critical to what we do. We can't function well without it. But there's more than one way to do that. And some people don't want to come to the meetings for, I think, obvious reasons, but they can still communicate with us. We all have telephones, we all have emails, and through the magic of electronics, we can talk to each other without seeing each other. We get calls, you get them, I get them, emails. So if for one reason or another where you figure you're denied access to us here, or you just simply don't want to show up, you can always call us, send us something in advance. Yeah, it's nice to be here where everybody can see you on TV, but that doesn't always happen. But if you write, that becomes a public record and everyone can see that. And it's much more meaningful sometimes to have it in writing laid out in front of you, where you can reflect on that before you get to the meeting, or even after, but those are alternatives. So don't think that we don't listen and we don't care, because we do. And that's why we have more than one way to hear from you. So please take advantage of that.
I mean, Mark, like that guy Harold that lived down there, the doctor, about his garbage. You know what he called? Sharon called me. I made the phone calls. We called him back. He came and thanked us. But I get phone calls, and I'm sure each one of you do, okay? Get phone calls. And I know, Elizabeth, you like, but I'm giving true stories of residents that call and say, you know what? Thank you. Thank you. You're doing a good job. Thank you that you took care of this, or thank you that you took care of that. Now, I know Henry's got them. I know you've got them. I know Sharon, and I know Elizabeth's probably got them. But you know what? Hey, it's not, they don't have to come here. They can call us. They can send us an email. They can send it to our clerk, and we got to address it. Or they can call our manager, and we got to address it. So anyhow, let's move on.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, Henry. Thank you. Let's move on to council discussion A. Okay, Mr. Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to continue to discuss our proposed village budget. I'll just cover briefly last night's meeting, or yesterday afternoon's meeting, actually. And what we discussed at that point are we did a financial overview, and Lisa, our village finance administrator, was able to provide that for us. We provided a lot of in-depth detail about our financial position. Department heads were able to provide their presentations arguing for or supporting their request for the fiscal year 24-25. And the millage rate that we focused that budget on was 3. We presented 2 scenarios last night, 3 and the rollback rate. At a millage rate of 3, that would have resulted in a levy, that is the cash that we get from the taxes, of about $18.95 million. Representing about a $262.26 increase in the median value of a home on that person's property tax bill for the Isla Morada proportion of the tax bill. So tonight, what we're hoping to do is to get into a little bit further detail on the millage rate, provide various numbers so that you guys can talk about them, see what the implications are from a property tax perspective, see where we stand financially, and what potentially we may need to modify to hit a particular target that council is interested in. So the target we're heading towards at the end of the day today would be to have some general guidance on a millage rate. The one that was discussed yesterday, both 3 and the rollback, neither of those are fixed in stone, and we're not going to be voting on one tonight either. A decision on that will not be made until the September 5th budget hearing, where we'll present the tentative budget based on the feedback that we've received through these meetings, and even have further discussion at that point as to whether or not we've struck the right balance between taxation, services, and needs that our departments have presented to council and the public. So the next item that we'll move into before we get to the millage rate discussion would be council question and answers on the department presentations from last night. So having had a little bit of time to think about that, although I recognize it's a short timeline nonetheless, if there are additional questions about last night's presentations, we have our staff available to answer them, and I would encourage members of council to present those questions at this time.
Mark, do you have?
I have a general question. So we heard the wonderful presentations, and they were very well done, and the presenters were all very well prepared. So I appreciate that. But in the event that we decided that we wanted, let's say we just determined we wanted to approve everything that was presented in every one of those budgets by every one of the department heads, what would the millage rate need to be in order to fulfill that?
As presented yesterday, that would be 3. Now, there's a number of permutations and combinations, and one of our public speakers highlighted that. We have different levers we can press to change things, right? We have our fund balance, and we'll get into that discussion, I suspect, as we enter into the millage rate discussion, because there's monies there that we can use for non-recurring expenses. Typically, you don't want to allocate fund balance towards a budget to suppress the numbers unless it's on a non-recurring expense. The reason for that, one-time expenses, okay, we can use fund balance for a one-time expense because it's not going to come back again next year. We don't want to, from a policy perspective, staff would suggest, get in the habit of using fund balance to defray recurring expenses like staffing or insurance or things like that, because what that does is it creates an artificial suppression of the levy, and then it has to catch up the following tax year. And if we were to get in the mode of continually drawing down fund balance for recurring expenses, we'd have a structural deficit in our budget that sooner or later would come back to bite us with a significant tax increase or be confronted with the need to curtail services or staffing because of those kinds of decisions. So it's very important, particularly over time, not to use fund balance to pay recurring expenses. So we'll talk about that as we head in that direction.
So with the exception of the yet-to-be-determined amount of compensation under the collective bargaining agreement, if all of us, it would be a miracle, I know, but if all of us agreed that we liked everything in here as presented, that millage rate would have to be 3%. Is that a fair statement to say?
Not including the...
Excluding the collective bargaining.
There would be yet another alternative. We could identify, for instance, some capital project or other non-recurring project that is being charged to the general fund as opposed to some other revenue source. And if we used fund balance to pay for that particular item or items, that could, in theory, bring the millage rate down a little bit by the amount of that expense that we'd be trading off and paying in fund balance, but at the same time, recognize it's a scale, right? If we take the money over here from fund balance and pay for what was being paid in general fund, we're going to have less money in fund balance available for other purposes, but that's certainly a decision we can make consciously and still fund the entire budget, just move the source of the funding ever so slightly to accommodate that type of request. And in fact, when we finish this conversation on millage rate, staff are going to go back and we'll say, okay, here's the millage rate that council is kind of leaning towards, right? And we'll take a look at all of our numbers and we'll come back at tentative budget time with a proposal that looks at what we believe to be the best way to achieve that balance. Either A, using fund balance to pull it down, or B, making some decisions to cut something if we really had to. We would like to support all of our department heads' needs and requests because they've justified them quite well. So we'll be as creative as we can, but those levers are both in play based on council direction today and between now and the point that you get that tentative budget proposal.
Right, so I think I have one or two more questions, and then I'm sorry for... You asked me first, so, but maybe I'll help you. I'll ask some questions you guys might like to ask, and I'll save time in the long run. So, I personally, and I know some other council members have been interested in purchasing lands for conservation purposes, for habitat protection, for retirement of building rights, or others add to the list as you see fit. So, I did not see. I saw some, I'll call it lip service to that in here, but I didn't see a level that I was satisfactory to me. So in order to let's say, for example, we wanted to add $500,000 or $2.5 million, whatever that number might be, based upon the way it's presented at this moment, we would need to either eliminate something in a department head's line item or more than one department head, or go to a balance or an account that we already have the money and transfer that for that purpose, or a combination of those, or pray that the money falls out of the sky. Those would be the three options, I think. So, and then I'll tag on this. Was there a consensus of the council that we change the nomenclature of the line that I don't like about the landscape mitigation fund? Those are diametrically opposed things. We are not mitigating any landscape. We're mitigating habitat loss. So if you want a separate fund for landscape projects, great, I'm in. And the other one for habitat restoration, that would be, in my view, and I would like to ask the council if that's something that we can fix if you think it's wrong like I do. Can we fix that?
Yeah, well, I think if council's generally supportive, staff are clearly supportive of it, so in my mind, it's a slam dunk. Yes, we can change the words, and we thought of maybe Habitat Restoration Fund. You know, when you think of the word landscape, there's also this whole field called landscape ecology, and it talks about how humans, development, and environment interact, and it's a whole field of ecology. So some staff don't have the objection to the word landscape, but they also don't object to changing it to something else to make it very clear what we're intending to do. So in short, yes, we can change that unless I'm hearing something from council saying we don't want to call it habitat.
Well, my point is that there's messaging in the name. And I think that the purpose of the fund should be consistent with the name of the fund. So that's my point. So if we could achieve that, I would leave a happy man tonight. I'm done.
Yes, are we all in agreement that we can change the landscape mitigation fund to the habitat restoration fund? Does anyone care? That's really what
that doesn't mean we can't have a landscape fund. We can, but it's the source of the funds, and we've spoken about this. We've had 2 votes on it in the last 3 or 4 meetings, and I thought that was enough to kind of at least give a foothold on the policy that those funds should be used for the purposes that are mentioned in the code and the comp plan, rather than to creatively interpret other uses for them.
So Mark, you brought up 2 points. One is renaming a fund. That's one point. Mm-hmm. And then the second issue I heard you bring up was about finding funding for land acquisition. So can we talk about those 2 separately?
You can. I just got them on the table at the same time. But yes, ma'am, that would be fine with me.
Yes.
Okay. Staff were aware of the request to kind of think about land acquisition. We were going to be waiting for a little bit of council direction on what magnitude before we bake something into that. But what I would say about that is, depending on what that number is, whether it's 500,000 or it's 1 million, certainly as we're looking at the budget at present, and we'll get into this conversation and see, there's a document that we distributed to each of you, and it has the ending fund balance associated with each of these different millage rate options that are on the table. It also tells you at the bottom how much reserve council policy would dictate for hurricanes. That number at the bottom is $9.7 million, 9.8 if you round it, I suppose. And that's based on council direction, prior council direction, for it to be 40% of expenditures. So if you take that 9.7 and subtract it from any of those balances that appear in the ending fund balance column, you end up with our unrestricted fund balance. Now, general accounting practices, that the Government Finance Officers Association has some best practices on what you want to maintain in those reserves. Generally, it's not less than 2 months of your operating expenses. So what does that mean? Well, if we're in between 2 to 3 months of operating expenses, we're probably in the realm of, and I'm going to ballpark it here, so those of you at home with your abacuses, please don't call me out for being not exactly right. It'll put us somewhere between, let's say, $3.2 and $4.6 million as a recommended reserve to span general operating reserves or emergencies, whatever you want to call it, a rainy day fund. And that's recommended as a financial best practice. What makes our reserves unique is that we have an exceptional hazard that many cities across the U.S. don't have. So while GFOA's standard for a unrestricted fund balance is that 2 to 3 month range, they attach a significant proviso to that, in that you also have to be aware of particular hazards or things that are unique to your local environment that may require some other funding. That's why we have the hurricane reserve. And speaking with our emergency operating people, including Chief Abel, they believe that number is pretty close to what we should have in the event of a major hurricane. I've checked with Monroe County. Their reserve is $10 million for a hurricane. And I believe because Marathon combines theirs with something else, theirs is even well beyond either one of us when it comes to what's in that reserve labeled as hurricane, but they have other things in it as well. So we believe that number is in the ballpark. Does it mean because it's a standard that we have to always comply with it? No, we can bring it up or down as council determines is appropriate for both our risk profile and our needs at that particular time. So back to the core question about land acquisition, is there money within the fund balance as presently exists, and assuming we don't have to use it to close other budget gaps in the general fund, I would say yes, that money's there, and you can either A, leave it right where it's at and continue to do what we do, or B, we could receive direction from council to establish a specific account to put it in so that it just kind of sits in that account and is separated from the rest of the unrestricted fund balance so that we know how much is there, and when we go to acquire property, that would be the first place we would look to do that, and then, if necessary, augment it with other financial sources. And I'll add one other potential option, because you laid them out quite well, Councilman Gregg, in terms of what they might be. One other option could always be that you could go with a conventional loan, spread the payments out, that kind of thing. If council were so inclined on a particular purchase to do that, that might be one way to kind of rebuild reserves if you're in a mode where you needed to do that. And I don't believe we are at this juncture based on what we have, but if one were, that would be an option on the table as well.
Okay, so yeah, Henry, let me ask one question real quick to Rob about that. So Rob, do we have this money? Like, I know that we had 10 million with FL class that we got like 350 to 400 in interest that we made in a year on that money. Is this money, this 9.7, almost 9.8 million, are we making any interest on this money?
There's another conversation that we need to tee up about this in particular, and Lisa mentioned it yesterday. She said that she was going to be reaching out to a financial advisor. Why is that? Because one of the first things I did when I came here, and one of the first things that Lisa did when she comes here, anybody who's done this for any length of time, is you look at those accounts and you say, okay, are we maximizing our potential for interest income?
Right.
And our previous policy, the one that's been adopted by council, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but I believe I'm pretty accurate, I think it's about 10 million was the limit that we could put with FL class. Now, maybe that's appropriate, maybe it's not. I think we need to have a discussion around that, because we also have, in addition to something like this parked funding for the hurricane money, which is around that $10 million amount, we have potentially the option to look at, our spending over time and figure out in those bank accounts, do we never dip below a certain line, right? The rest of that money, 30 some odd million dollars that one of our speakers spoke about, is there to pay bills, right? And it's allocated already. It's appropriated to pay things. It's not just sitting there, but those bills don't all come due at the same time. And that money, you will fluctuate up and down month to month as contracts get paid out and what have you. But when you analyze it over a longer period of time, you can sometimes see there's kind of like a line in there in your cash flow where you're never really dipping below that line, even though it's restricted. So there may be an argument based in working with a good financial advisor who monitors it very closely to say, okay, maybe we can get short-term investments, whether they're 90-day T-bills or something. This money's going to be there all the way up until December. Let's put it in for 6 months. Or maybe FLC or one of these pooled funds that's authorized by the state of Florida has a money market type thing that actually beats the T-bills. And that's what we experienced back in New York, actually, was we found a entity kind of this parallel back in New York that was able to actually beat the treasury rates on a sustained basis with cash liquidity and nil risk. So those are the things when you're looking at investment is low risk, cash liquidity, and ability to manage your money so that you can maximize revenue and reduce the tax burden. And so we'll have that convo.
And interest rates are better today than they were a couple of years ago. But I talked to Matt last week and I said, man, why don't you come talk to our whole council? He's willing to do that. I went to his booth when he was there in the exhibit hall, had a very good conversation with them, and so, and plus Lisa, I mean, there's others out, I mean, that we can search out and try to get the best bang for our dollar.
And get into cash flow management so we can potentially even get a bigger bang out of that buck.
Right.
So that's the advisor question that Lisa raised yesterday. And Henry, I'm sorry for not, continuing to speak.
Go ahead.
All right, I enjoy your presentations. The 10 million is at 5%,
Right.
if I remember correctly. Mr. Yates, the previous manager, made that arrangement. He also, I guess with us, the previous council made the arrangement of the hurricane situation, which was, I believe, at 20% one time. It was raised with the last council to 40% as far as hurricane evacuation, not evacuation, just the problems.
Hurricane funds, right.
Why are we funding the hurricane to such a large amount? We were at 8% for some time, if I'm not mistaken. You mentioned the county being at 10 million. The 8 million was certainly in excess of what we needed. And if we do need it, we go to the bank and we borrow it. This is not a big deal. And the state will reimburse us. May take a little bit, but the state will. So why are we holding all that cash in reserve? And we are the bankers for the city. It's not necessary. That's my point. We have no idea what the next storm is going to be like, but furthermore, we pay a service to clean up the roads, etc., and then they pay the actual service that does the work. So why are we putting up all that money for a hurricane?
Henry, I think the last council, the consensus was that 5 million wouldn't, if we have a bad hurricane like Irma hit the lower Keys, 5 million wouldn't even, we couldn't touch anything for 5 million.
I'm saying we can go get 5 million.
No, I understand.
That is a policy decision for this group. Are you asking us to have that conversation right now? I mean, is that what, are you?
I'm just adding on to what the manager was.
But he,
I'd like to weigh in on that because I know some of that. I mean, I'm not everything, I'm not an expert, but if you go back and look at how we handled Irma versus how the state handled it and the other municipalities in Marathon and the Keys, we had the cash. We did borrow, but it was like a line of credit that I don't think we used, or if we did use it, it was a very small amount. And after a storm, it is extremely competitive to get good services here. And you might recall there was a time where the Governor Scott at that time actually came in and hijacked some of the
He did from here
and took them to the lower Keys. And so, you know, when the grits hit the fan, no pun intended there in a hurricane, it's the high dollar that gets the work done. And sometimes that makes a huge difference on how fast you can recover.
So we have access to the money.
but what I think your issue is, if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Henry, is that we've got all this money sitting without any kind of return on it. And I think that was Rob's point, that you've identified that. And maybe what we're wanting to ask is, what kind of timeline are you working on, Rob, to take a look at that? I mean, we have $34 million, which is sort of doing nothing. And that might be a middle ground between having this money ready and available to us, but also giving us a return, right? And so maybe we're asking for some sort of timeline on, like, what is this, a 5-month project? You know, maybe it's a 2-month project where you address that.
Hey, Rob, let me interject one thing there real quick, because what Mark said was very important, okay? If people remember all the refrigerator, freezer, all the appliances that were lined up on the old road over there.
Refrigerator row, they called it.
Yeah, those guys worked here for us, but they were offered more money and went to Big Pine Key and worked out of there because they were getting paid, I forget what the numbers were, but it was like 3 times what we were paying.
We got hijacked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that caused a delay in recovery and businesses opening back up and people getting back in their homes and getting back to normal. And we had the strength of that account to put the money up front and to, I mean, we minimized it, but we still were a victim of that. But those who have to borrow, and borrowing after a storm, the creditors look at you very differently than they do before when you've got a $6 billion property overall assessment.
If we're going to get reimbursed, what difference does it make?
Well, the question is how and when and how much you get reimbursed. And this savings fund helps to eliminate that uncertainty.
And also how quickly and efficiently you get stuff taken out.
Yeah.
Because if there's no more hurricane disaster teams that are here, they're all going somewhere else where they're getting paid more money and getting paid quickly.
Pay them the money.
Well, those people want to know how they're going to get paid before they start work. And when we show them we've got the money in the bank, they respond a little quicker than the folks that say, well, wait a minute, we'll get back to you. I got to call the banker. So that's the way I look at it. I'm really conservative about this. And I mean, it's putting us at risk if we don't have everything available to us to deal with a storm. I mean, those things are unpredictable. They're getting more common. They're getting stronger. And now we have the threat of rapid intensification. That's something brand new where it comes off of Cuba at a 2 and it hits us at a 5. We never had that before. That was unusual. So these are trends. I mean, I'm not a weatherman and I don't know a lot about that stuff, but I know to be scared about things that can happen and be prepared to deal with that up front. And this is an easy way, and we can use that money and earn interest on it. Meanwhile, it's right in our back pocket if we need it.
Can we get that response from Rob about some sort of time frame for getting some return on that money while it sits there?
Well, we already have a little over $10 million. I think it's 10.8 about. Lisa, is that accurate? For what now? How much do we have invested? 10 million, yes. It's a little like 10.8 or something, I believe. And in terms of reaching out to a financial advisor and talking a little bit about cash flow, and I want to be clear that $34 million that people keep throwing around is not like the hurricane reserve. That's actually money that we pay out to salaries, to contractors, to insurance companies. So it's not a reserve of sorts, but it does have a baseline in theory on our expenditures that maybe month to month we don't really dip below. And that part, that baseline, is what we might want to talk about an advisor about how to schedule that and get it invested to even get more money. We'll have to modify our policy, our investment policy, to be able to do that. But getting back to the question of timing, Elizabeth?
I could say I do actually have an appointment with an investor next Thursday. He'll be down here in the Keys, and it's from a company called Deep Blue Investments. They're out of Tampa, Florida, and I've dealt with them for the past probably 6 or 8 years. They're very well versed in investments, and they have a wide variety of investment advisors. So he will be down here on Thursday to speak with him, and they're very good about giving investment reports for us, coming and speaking regularly to give investment updates. So I think we would get a lot out of having that. I've never been used to having something like we've got with the local government investment pool with Florida Class. I've had that before, but it's not been to that extent of $10 million. It's usually just a smaller portion, so.
So bottom line is we have that meeting coming up. We can report back to council and flesh out a little bit of a better timeline, as well as begin to take a look at that investment policy and advance that back for council consideration based on those conversations and any increased authority we may need to be able to put even more than the $10 million limit that's prescribed in that present policy. So there's opportunity. We're already seizing part of it with, as Councilman Rosenthal cited, over about 5% interest or so. That's on the 10.8 million that's already there. That's effectively the hurricane response in a way, that reserve. But there is additional opportunity to pursue, and that's the conversation that we're having with Lisa and trying to circle back to council thereafter.
Just say one more thing. When Irma hit here, residential construction costs were in the $250 to $300 per square foot range. Today, they're about $700 if you talk to a local contractor, because everything has gone up. Nobody can afford to live here. The labor is expensive because it's all brought in. Everything costs a fortune. So I don't even know if what we have now is going to be adequate to cover us if we get nailed by a 4 or a 5 storm. So I'm willing to live with what we have. I mean, I'd like to increase it, but I don't think there's an appetite for that here, and that's fine. But there's stuff, I worry about this every day, and I just don't think we should play games with it by lowering this and to adjust for that. We've done well with this in the past. Many of our councils that are diverse tend to agree. That's the strength of our community right there. Mm-hmm. And you just saw how much our collective assets have gone up in value. And the faster we get back on our feet, the better off we'll be. And that money provides the strength for us to do that right away.
So Lisa, when this company comes, can you have it set up to where they could come and talk to the council, come to our council meeting, Absolutely. And maybe they have ways or they have creative scenarios that they can help us with the storm money or help us, tell us that new products that are available or they could be very creative.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. You have something, Elizabeth?
Just if I think it sounds like we're in agreement with that, but then we kind of had gotten off track with this land acquisition fund. So can we just revisit that and talk about what that might look like?
Well, I just kind of was leading up to where could the money come from, because it's not in the budget now.
Yeah.
And how much would we want? I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there is a provision in our either code, comp plan, or both that says we're supposed to have one of these funds to acquire land, or to at least to put the mitigation fees in there for that purpose. It's not in here. So I think we should first confirm, and John can help us, or help me at least, to confirm that that's supposed to be in here. And if it is, let's put it in. And if so, let's put some money behind it. Let's fund it. Let's get it going. But how much do you think we need?
I mean, that would be interesting, and might be helpful to get some feedback from staff. And this maybe, I don't know exactly who that would be, but we all know that, there's lots of benefit in land acquisition on so many levels, for takings cases, for conservation, I don't even know if our policy is fleshed out to the point where it describes what that fund is utilized for. Do you know? Does anyone know?
It's for restoration of habitat and acquisition of land where habitat can be restored.
I think she's talking about the reference to the other land acquisition fund that you were describing.
Okay, there's one, yes. Okay, so that one I think is, there's a list that we're supposed to have, and a plan that we're supposed to have, and a fund to do all that. There's a whole program there, and it's just been blown off for 20 years.
Maybe.
How about Peter coming up? We could bring Peter up here to.
Well, I think the real question is not so much whether we can or should have, an effort to pursue the priority properties that are on that list, and or any others that may come to council as requests or priorities, right? If you're all in agreement that they're a priority, then, and we have direction to proceed, we can try to acquire them. I think the real question is, how much do you want to put in there? And really, the answer to that is, well, we've seen properties that have been purchased for $600,000. We've seen properties that have been purchased for $4 million. With absent a specific property, it makes it very hard to say how much money should go in there. And that's probably one of the reasons why you don't have a fund established, because once a property acquisition topic comes up, let's say like the church that we closed on recently, if that is rising to the level of a priority at council, we figure out how we're going to fund it. And generally speaking, where we're looking to do that would be if we have available fund balance. That's the first place we're looking, right? And so that amount there can be accessed, as can a few other sources of funding, to acquire land. So when one comes up, we either A, can identify the funding available to acquire it, or B, we might come back with a recommendation that we take out conventional financing to get it. Another thing we could do is pick a number and put it into an account so that when a property arises that we want to acquire, we know at least a portion of it, maybe all of it, depending on that number, is in that fund, and it's separate from these other reserves that we have.
There are a couple of issues here that I think we're getting tangled. We're tangling a couple of issues. One is, and maybe someone here can help me with. In our code, it talks about we have land, a list of conservation properties that are prioritized for purchase, and that is called what?
Peter will help me, but it's part of the Land Acquisitions Action Plan, if I think that's the correct name for that.
And our code says we need to pay attention to that.
Well, our Land Acquisition Advisory Committee works to develop that, and we're supposed to fund that, but that's a separate fund.
That is different than we want to buy a church and we.
Oh, yeah.
That's different. So I feel like there's a little bit of hesitation. Could I just finish this one sentence since I'm in the middle of it? Okay, thank you. Sorry, not sorry, actually. I feel like there's some hesitation to follow the code that says we're supposed to be looking at these properties and funding and creating a fund in order to purchase them, not when we want to, but as part of what we do in our daily work. That is the fund, that we don't have a dedicated funding source for that fund. And that is this conversation, I think, that you're bringing forward.
Okay, I think we need to let our council tell us what that code or what the comp plan says, because Mark just said, I think we should bring Peter up. Peter does this. This is his thing, but I think we need to let John tell us what our comp plan and what our code says.
I think it was done by resolution. There was a land acquisition, LAAC, Land Acquisition Advisory Council, and there was a set of procedures that were enacted back, I think it was in 2003, and then was updated at some point later. I believe it's spelled out through resolution, and it's set forth in there. But it doesn't say, like what Rob was alluding to, it doesn't say the policy decision as to how much do you want to fund, how aggressive do you want to fund, but it sets forth parameters for nominating nominating properties. How does it get acquired? How do you appraise it? How do you acquire it? And things like that. But it doesn't get into the specific amount as to how much do you want to fund to actually effectuate it.
Okay, so can we make a standard operating procedure that would be simple to do this? That, if Peter is the one handling that he follows the standard operating procedures. I don't know why the five of us couldn't make something that is very simple and it states what it's supposed to do, what that fund, what properties, whether it's restoring habitat, replanting habitat, or whatever it may be.
It's acquisition. That's different than that's.
No. There are two, as I understand, there are at least two, and the one is the one that John just mentioned, and it's to be funded by, I believe I'd just say, the discretion of the council. We squeeze the balloon and pull money from here and more over there. But the other one that I've been railing on lately is the one that is to be funded strictly from the fees by people that receive a permit, and they pay a mitigation fee into a very restricted specialized fund. And that money is to be used to restore a habitat somewhere else or buy land that can be restored. In other words, it's scarified or damaged or whatever. It's the no net loss of hammock fund.
And that is in the code.
Yes.
I think it just says that it shall be held in an escrow account. It doesn't specify the name of it or anything like that. But that one is in the code.
Yeah.
But that money is from mitigation funds. So that's
Correct.
already clear. But now, let's put that on one side.
That's one, but the two can work together. Yes.
But what I think we're now talking about is in reference to this LAAC that John brought up that doesn't have a dedicated funding source, which is what I think we're asking for here. This is land acquisition fund that is utilized for this priority list of conservation lands. That's its own thing. We don't have a funding source. We don't have the simple procedure to direct Pete to go forward.
Pete, can you come up if you're out there and just chat a little bit about how properties on that list, first of all, become available and the process by which we would bring those to the attention of council for potential acquisition if and when they become available. So how we know they become available and how we might go about navigating that, and whether that is something that happens automatically or only if someone asks us about.
Sure. So I think a lot of what we're talking about has already been done. We have procedures in place for acquiring land. The Land Acquisition Advisory Committee has worked on and nearly completed an action plan. We're going to have that ready for you soon, within the next couple of months. So we do have a priority acquisition list, as we're supposed to have. We have that. This council approved it. So that list has gone to the Monroe County Land Authority. They are working on the behalf of the village. So they are scanning the MLS every day. And if one of those properties comes up, they will contact us, which they have a number of times, which we've done with this council. We've, I think, brought 2 properties before you now that have come up for sale. We aren't actively pursuing properties on this list that aren't for sale. Right? This is an active seller program. So when that happened, we brought the properties to the council. The council worked on 2 of those. One of those was the AV Investors property, and amongst discussions, the council came up with an offer price. An offer was made. That offer was rejected, and we kind of are just sitting now waiting on the next move from the property owner and realtor. So that's the procedure we have in place now.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
But I think that the issue, for example, were you talking about the pecan leather property? So I think that this group would have possibly had another response to the request if we had dedicated funds for conservation that had been, that were in a pool, where what we were looking at is, wow, that's a lot of money, and we're just going to come up with that out of who knows where, and is that fiscally responsible? And but this idea would be that, yeah, we prioritize land acquisition of conservation properties, and so when this kind of thing comes up, well, there's the money. It's already been set aside. It's available to us.
That property in particular was $2.5 million over appraised value.
Well, so maybe I misunderstood that. I mean, we all know that everything sells for over, most things sell for over appraised value, and this is a unique property, and we were being asked to pull that money from who knows where, right? And so my thought is that if we have an active fund that is being fueled, this would be a no-brainer. That is an amazing piece of property. It's unique. It's one, we'll never see that again in this town. It's going to be another Islander in next year.
They came before council and got shut down.
Well, council's changed, so
It's under development pressure, to say the least.
it's under development pressure.
The Glen property, they wanted $2 or $3 million to begin with.
3.
Yeah. Okay, and we bought 90 acres for $650,000. So, because I remember having a conversation with Peter. But I understand, but anybody can ask whatever they want, okay? But they have come before council, and a couple times I sat in the meetings and they got shut down.
Well, listen, where there is a will, there's a way. And just take a moment, pull back. We bought the Island Church property, we bought the Machado properties, and we bought Island Pinder's, your relative's old store. Yes, Silver and Spice. I don't think any of those were in the budget, but we decided that we wanted them, and the manager, Rob helped with the church property, but we found the money. We found it because we wanted, that was our determination. If we could find that same determination and apply that towards acquiring lands that we know sooner or later we either buy them or let them build on them, we need to put our money where our mouth is and make a statement that we're going to start buying these things to save them. And the ones that are under development pressure, like triage, that's the ones we ought to go for first. And the ones where people don't even realize that they have a problem, let them sit there and we'll deal with those later. But they're under development pressure. They're applying for federal permits to fill it in. We don't know what's going to happen, but if we just sit here on our thumbs and do nothing, pretty soon you'll see it cleared or developed, and then the opportunity is lost. And that will be on us. But that property has a lot of different habitats. I'm sorry to get off on a tangent on that, but Elizabeth is right. The opportunities don't come along often. And, willing seller is a big part of that. And I don't like getting held up for a over market price. But it depends on how bad we want to save it. And
but Mark, there's also people you're going to learn working with the corridor, wildlife corridor. There's people like Arnie Bellini that has Live Wildly. These guys are billionaires that they buy property for conservation, all conservation, all right? That's what they're building, the river to sea preserve, the rails to trails, and Florida has over 250 miles of trails now because of that. The underpass is under 75 for crocodiles or turtles or whatever. I mean, it's being done all over the state.
But we're talking about
okay,
here.
okay, I understand. But I'm saying those people will put up the money, okay, to help buy properties that maybe are just like Monroe County Land Authority will help us. But there's other avenues but we've never been involved with the wildlife corridor to do this, and I've learned all that in the last year.
That is what is amazing about this opportunity, that we have people with your knowledge who can put that information to work right now in our town.
We have a partner with the Land Authority who's willing to fund $4 million plus or minus for that. And so if we overpay, we're only overpaying the overage. We are in essence getting the property preserved for half of the appraised value. That's the bottom line. And so does the owner get a windfall? Who knows?
There's Florida Forever money too.
Well, so yes, exactly. So, and I think that's where Monroe County gets funding from as well. There are partners in that, and the stewardship and the other things. But, you know, it's not so much how much do we have to pay, it's how much we get to save. And the savings is because the county is our partner. So,
sure. Henry, go ahead.
The opportunity is right now. Right now. We're going to look at a budget that I have problems with. And once we decrease the budget, we're going to have some funding. It's right now. We can do it right now by the end of tomorrow or tonight or whatever, if you do it correctly as far as the budget has been written. Everybody that came up and spoke about their piece of the action here, did anybody come up and say, I'm satisfied, I don't need anything? Every budget hearing I said, what did you cut? It's a normal thing to say. Most budgets are there to be cut. In the private sector, yes, to be cut. And how are they going to be cut? And still maintain the services and this, that, and the other. We don't talk about that. This is not Christmas for the city. Everybody has something that they wanted. Well, they didn't have it last year. They still did the job. Why is it they have to have it this year? Everybody had something that they wanted. When you do a budget, if you do it properly, you start with zero and you work your way up. That's the right way to do a budget. Not what you have and add to it. You start with zero. I'm not going to sit here and go for Budget 101, but I do know a couple things. I've done it all my life. I started when I was 16 years old. You can't keep asking. You have to look how you can get the job done with added expense. You can do it. But I don't want to get involved with it. But anyway, if we make some cuts with the budget, hopefully we can take those cuts and put it where you want it and where you want it. It's there. Right now. Before 5 o'clock tonight or whatever. I encourage you to really start to look at that budget. I'm going to talk more about the 3 millage and all that good stuff, but I'm going to hold that off till later. But now's the time if you want to do it. Thank you.
You're welcome, Henry. Vice Mayor Mahoney, come on, you got us. No, go ahead. Don't you want to throw your? You don't have it. You've been sitting here thinking about it. And,
I'm listening to what everybody else wants to say.
Okay. Do you have a scenario yet?
No.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. So Henry, are you saying that you're willing to support the purchase of the Pecan Leatherman property if we budget it for next year?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that's cool. I'll put it on the agenda for next month, or for September. What does that cost, Pete?
Go ahead, you say it, and I say you're.
I just think you just want to buy something. To me, no offense, Mark, but you and Ted came back with $2 million for the Glen property, and we said no and got it for $650. I'm just let me just finish.
You are very wrong about that.
No, I don't think I
You did not
was.
participate in the negotiation, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, then if I don't, then I was told wrong, and I apologize. But that's what I was told, that you and Ted.
It was $3 million they wanted.
That you and Ted went up there and came back with $2 million. But that's not the point. That's not the point.
What they wanted, not what we agreed to.
Well, okay, so whatever. The point is that we seem to want to just, okay, if it's overpriced, to me, it's not smart business. I just don't agree. I just think you don't pay something that you don't have the value in. And I know it's a unique piece of property, but there's also different strategies you could take. And I know you're not going to agree with me, and I don't really want to go over it right now.
No.
So.
I'm just saying, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, our children and grandchildren will think it's a bargain.
Well, then maybe people should have thought about that before they started clearing land when they shouldn't have been clearing it without permits and stuff, but that's a whole nother story. Go ahead.
The property's listed at $6.7 million. I should mention, though, that the property owners or agents of the property owners have approached the village about the development of a single-family residential home with a tennis court on the property. We held a pre-application meeting with them. There are some questions about the development potential of the property based on its wetland status. So that's where we are right now. I believe the property still is listed for sale. However, the agents of the property owner are investigating this development potential that the village is also questioning right now.
Peter, what did it appraise for? 3.5, 4.2?
It was right around 4, 3.8. Yep.
Peter, and how much of that was available from the county again? Just remind everyone.
So the county, through the Florida Forever funding, would fund up to the appraised value. So it was 3.8, somewhere right around there, that could have been funded through Florida Forever via the Land Authority.
And who owns the property once it's bought? They own it, correct?
No, we own it.
Well,
No, that would stay under state ownership if it's purchased with the Florida Forever funding. The village would be the managers. Yeah, we are officially the managers of the property. But in perpetuity, it would be conservation property, never to be developed.
This is the same arrangement with Green Turtle Hammock and the Cactus property. Is my right?
It's not. So that was deeded to the village. The village is the owners of those property. That was deeded to the village. Different land acquisition program.
But the management side is the same, isn't it?
Yes. So we are responsible for managing.
The Green Turtle was bought by what? The trust?
That was Florida Communities Trust.
Okay,
Yes.
and it has to be open to the public so many hours to qualify.
That's right. That's why we have these management plans with all these components that we're trying to get approved, because we have to do that, and they come and inspect every year to make sure we're following these
That was Henry's.
procedures. Right, good.
I think they paid like $7 million for it, Henry. For 6 or 7 acres, whatever it was.
So
7.5 acres, just to set
Okay.
the record straight.
So it sounds like we're requesting to find in the budget $2.5 million for potential acquisition,
Whatever. First of all, don't get stuck on these appraisals. You can buy an appraisal. Most people do. It's common in the business. Doesn't have to be worth what the appraisal reads. Just a sideline comment. Believe me, I'm right. I know I'm right. So just because the appraisal says such and such and we have to pay such and such, that's a bunch of nonsense. I'm not going to mention any property.
I know where you're going.
You know where I'm going.
Going to the church again.
Right? I'm not going to mention that. But you know where I'm going.
You just did.
But you know where I'm going, truthfully. I mean, if the truth were known, it's a different number. But I'm not going to mention that. I've said enough already. But to rely on an appraisal, it's not worth what what's written on the paper. It really isn't. So anyway, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions for Peter while he's up here? No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Peter.
Sure.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, I have some other
Go ahead.
questions.
Go ahead.
Just in general, are we closed on that subject?
Not if we don't want to be.
Okay, well, that's.
Did we reach a conclusion?
I thought we reached a conclusion that we should look for that money, we should budget for that purchase.
Yes.
And then it'll go through the process, and it'll be on the agenda, and you'll have to, do a contract and all that.
I mean, now's the time for the budget.
It is, I mean, that's the point of a budget, is to have these conversations.
Staff's got to look, they got to figure out come back to us where they can get that money from.
Well, that's exactly, like, if we give that direction, just like if we said, we want to cut whatever, then that's coming back on September 5th.
That's it.
So, all right, are we done with that? Can we move to the next subject? Are you done with your habitat acquisition, or habitat thing?
I think so. I think I've made clear statements that the manager understands and we all understand. Yes?
Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. We have clear direction from council. You want us to bake in the number for acquisition of the Pecan Leatherman property at the amount that they wanted to sell it at. No negotiation of that price in theory, although we'll try, but council is saying pay up to what they are asking. And
I don't know if I agree with that.
I say let I think the way it goes is the land authority negotiates it.
They do.
So we can give them authority to negotiate, and y'all can keep that number under your hat until it's too hot under the tent or whatever.
So I think the land authority, Pete, correct me if I'm wrong, has been attempting to negotiate, and the seller will not budge. So if the seller is not willing to negotiate further with the land authority, we're confronted with the decision of either paying what they want for it or not. And if the idea is that we want to appropriate funding to pay for it, then we have to appropriate that level of funding. And if staff are directed to, we would proceed with negotiating that purchase and have a contract and all the rest. So we would want to be very clear before we do that there is council consensus around that potential outcome. And if there is, we need clear direction now before we start heading that path. But to Elizabeth's point, yes, September 5th is when that budget would be a tentative budget, and we'd still have opportunity to change that direction. But in preparing for September 5th, we would put that number in the budget, and it would become a direction of staff to keep working on that issue.
Well, this,
me
we
too.
can't,
This is-
we,
Go ahead,
this is
Henry.
not.
I just have to say something. Your conversation should never have been said. If you're going to negotiate something, I don't know how to do it with the Sunshine Law, but all I'm saying is what you just said, I wish you hadn't have said it. If you're going to negotiate something, truthfully. That's all.
If council is asking us to budget enough money to purchase it, I don't know how we have that conversation and get a maximum.
I understand
Budgeting
that.
is one thing and approving is another.
But
So.
this-
Me personally, I don't think we should go in and pay just because they're asking that much. They know. I'm not going to take part of that because we got the Glen property I don't care if this piece of property is nice. The Glens owned it since 1955. And you know what? It was a plotted subdivision, and we hung on long enough, and our attorney negotiated, and we got it right. I'm not paying over appraised value, $2.5 million. I'm sorry, Henry, I think that's what you're getting at, right? Okay.
Wait a second.
Go ahead.
Wait a
Vice Mayor.
second. First of all, you guys, you two, all of a sudden want to pull $2.5 million from somewhere. How does that affect our staff? How does that, which don't you think you guys are like jumping into something without seeing? Let me just finish, Mark. You're like, boom. Why, don't you think this is just, don't you think this is just, what are you going to cut to get the $2.5 million? Shouldn't that discussion come first before you two want to go shopping?
Well, we should have had that conversation when we bought the church.
Well, of course
we went whoosh and we bought the church.
Yeah, but that was before.
We don't even know what we're going to do with it.
Okay, Mark, you and I clearly going to have a timeout here because I don't understand why The church thing, okay, I know everybody's looking at me at the church. I don't really care. But the point is that this is a budget. These people have come to us with what they say they need to keep this village and the facilities running right. Now, without even saying, you know, the budget wasn't involved with the church, and now I understand that differently, but where is this $2.5 million coming from? How is that going to affect what they've asked for? Don't you think that should be addressed before we go shopping?
We have not yet determined anything with regard to any of the departments.
But that's got to come from somewhere.
Well, we'll let the manager do that, because that's why I asked those questions at the outset. I already knew the answers, but I wasn't sure if you did and others. So now we all know the answers. There's ways that you can find money in the budget, just like we did with the church and the Machado property and the Island Silver and Spice property. I'm just saying, let's do it up front this time, instead of doing it on the fly, doing a budget amendment 3/4 through the year, so that it doesn't look like we're playing games. Let's do it open, transparent, right here in this moment.
I don't know if this council has, I mean, this is the time to have conversations. This is the time, rather than in the middle of the year when someone just comes up with some harebrained idea. And I'm not saying your churches, because I'm all in for that. But I'm saying, and I have another conversation along these same lines that I'd like to discuss now for the future. I mean, this is the time. And then on September 5th, they come back saying, we can make this happen, we can't. You know, and depending on how firm we are, they will come back on September 5th with where that money can come from.
I'm not interested in going where you and Mark want to go,
Well,
paying $3
Henry-
million more than.
I'm saying raise the money. Don't earmark it. Just raise the money.
But let's also be clear, we're not making a decision, all we're doing tonight is making a decision to find that money. This isn't a council meeting, so we're not approving anything. We're talking, so we're not voting on anything, but we're having a conversation about if we want to entertain the thought of making that purchase, then we should find the money, like be responsible and locate where that's going to come from.
There's the hurricane fund right there. They're talking about it could be lowered. Take it from the hurricane fund, 9.7 or 9.8.
See, that's the thing. We don't want to do that. And I think you might be just joking, but that's how we run our town a lot of times. We come up in the middle of the year and say, "Oh my God, here's an opportunity," and then we have to find the money. It doesn't help any department. So
We can find the money without cutting departments out. There's a way to do it. Let's give the manager a shot at doing it, and you don't like it, we vote it down.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, let the staff come back with some options, 2 or 3 options of where it comes from.
That's right.
But to go pay $3 million over, I mean, how does that look to taxpayers that we're going and paying $3 million over appraised value? Because the seller and the real estate agent want to, yeah.
In 20-something years ago, we paid $10 million for this property right here. And I'm not a record keeper in the real estate world, but that had to be the number 1 or the top 3 real estate purchases of all time in Islamorada. And it was unbelievable. And today, that's chicken feed. I mean, look at it now. Look at the future. We paid more than it was probably worth because it was a wreck. The place was run down, and the Lagoon Saloon was a rat farm, and there's a lot of problems. But look what it's got now. And so you have to look at the future. Today, sometimes it doesn't make sense. I agree.
Now, Mark, it ain't going to really matter. I mean, our kids and grandkids and...
Well, 50 years from now, no one will remember our names. Someone else will be living in our houses, and all of our money will be spent by someone else. So what really matters is right now.
I'll be here.
Well,
I hope so.
Henry will be here.
But I mean, all fun and games aside, it is about 50 years from now, because what we're trying to do now is preserve open space so that we can catch fish and we still have birds in the community. I mean, we still have some nature left. That is like that. I don't want to.
Smart though, and I don't think that's.
There's no. I mean, the thing is that this. Well, I can't even. I'm not going to go down that path. But anyway, Can we move on? Because I think we gave the direction to see where the money can come from. There's no decision about
Squeeze
the purchase.
the balloon.
Yeah, but Rob, there is the people came. I was at the council meeting when they came, and they got shut down because of habitat and stuff, whatever it was, or Peter said wetlands or whatever it was, it did not happen. Okay?
It doesn't,
Back to the budget.
Yeah.
So
Go ahead.
when it comes to the budget question and what we're being asked to come back with on September 5th, what I'm still not really hearing council consensus on. I hear 2 people saying yes and 3 people saying no, so I need to be.
I didn't hear that,
Okay,
Rob,
well,
but let's
I'd like
ask
to-
the question.
I'd like to be clear, just to make sure. What I'm hearing is that we'll put, in what comes to council on September 5th, somewhere between $2.6 and $3 million into a land acquisition fund and portray for council's review and consideration what the implications of that would be, both with respect to our proposed budget and our fund balances, because I'll foreshadow a little bit. That's probably coming straight out of fund balance, most likely, but we'll see. We'll have alternatives to examine.
if you cut in other places.
It could happen that way too. We'll have to see where the rest of this conversation goes, because we're also just talking about one item, and we haven't got to where council prefers to be for the overarching budget yet, and we also have collective bargaining. So I'm trying to pull together all the pieces from this conversation so that we can then decide, is it cutting? Is it transferring from general fund? But I just need to get consensus that what you want us to bring back is a proposed tentative budget with a land acquisition fund somewhere in that 2.6 to 3 range. And if council says yes, as a group, then that is exactly what we'll bring back. And that has nothing to do with buying a specific property. It is a dollar value that would be allocated to this fund that could be used to purchase that property or any other, but it has to be, sufficient to cover at least the conversation we're talking about now. But I'm looking for council direction and put that 3 in there or don't.
I'll second what you just said.
Yeah, me too.
Exactly.
Okay, so put it in and we'll go from there.
Yes.
Hearing
Great.
consensus, we have 3?
We have 3.
you got
Yeah,
Mark
what more 3 do you want?
Okay, all right.
We got 3, but okay. I have another issue I'd like to bring up unless anyone else has something.
I don't agree with it, but that's okay.
That's all right. Does anyone else I want to bring something else up?
Don't bring anything else. Let's settle this.
Yeah, I mean, it's done. That's done. Now moving on.
Okay.
Okay.
You got 3 votes.
There's no
3
mention
nods.
in.
Go ahead.
Are we good for moving on?
We're going to move on to B, or we?
No. I just have some other discussion.
Okay, go ahead.
There's no mention in here of any kind of planning or future look ahead to any kind of workforce housing that we might want to initiate. And this is a bigger conversation, but this would be the time to have it. Do we have any interest in thinking about, again, some sort of funding mechanism for village-directed workforce housing?
Well, what did you have in mind? I'm interested.
We've got lots of early out allocations, and it could look like anything, and we have lots of resources to pull from. I mean, it could be anything from village purchased property that we build on and we create housing. It could be it could be anything, but we continue to run up. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. We continue to run up against walls about we have no workforce housing. And at some point, if we continue to rely on the private sector to solve that problem, then we might never have that. Now, when you look at the county, they had an interesting model recently where they put in county funds to match a private developer's funds up on, I want to say, mile marker 95. And all of a sudden, with this really creative and nimble response to this crisis that we're having, we have, I think they have like 112 workforce housing that units that people can actually live and work in. I mean, are we in that space today, or are we going to continue to ignore the problem?
Okay, well, I'd like to know, because since I've been on council and this council, we shoot it down. We say no more. I thought everything is, you guys are saying no more, whether it's workforce, whether it's market rate.
I never said that.
I never said that either.
I mean,
said planning.
Because they're talking about, infrastructure, we don't have the water, we don't have this, we don't have that, we can't, the cars on the highway. I mean, I've been talking about affordable housing, wanting to go. There's people that have actually, I've talked to Rob about it and talked to John about it, but you know what? I'm not going to waste my time because it gets shot down. There's companies that'll come in here and do merchant build for you, put up the money, all they need is the land.
I mean, you
okay?
are in a
We have
position
land.
to make this happen.
A private developer will do that.
We have the non-hammock part of the Machado property. It's
I
just
understand.
sitting idle. It's a liability. We're mowing it and
I know. And Mark, you and I and Henry have been on council since we bought that, and we've never done anything with it.
I mean, I'm sorry that past councils have never addressed this to the level at which we could, but now we're up against a wall, and that forces us to take action at some point. And what an opportunity, especially if you're in favor of it. And this would be the time to think about allocating village funds to then have available to us when we want to task our staff with some creative solutions for meaningful workforce housing.
What you're talking about, Elizabeth, is being done all over the state.
But not here.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. I'm just saying, I was at the Northeast Florida Planning Commission Awards Banquet, and they had 2 young planners and CRAs, and they took a trailer park. They took the density from 1 to 3, and they built a major affordable housing, thing. But everybody here wants that. We're talking about, it's about stopping construction, stopping building, but we've got to, no, that's what we've been doing here. I mean, there's contractors in this community. We could do what Monroe County did with Pritam Singh. He had to build 30 units on property at Isla Bella before he got a permit to build those units. He had to build 30. That was the cost of doing business. We should be doing something like that here before we let Publix. They would have had to, build whatever, or, whoever. When these new people come in here for retail, or Sun Community could have had to put, we could have made them put 20, but it didn't happen. I mean, that was before us.
So are you in favor then of thinking about
I'm in
this
favor.
now?
There's plenty of Terry Horton from D.R. Horton does affordable housing that are up to 200 miles an hour. All these guys are doing that.
well, I don't want to rub salt in the wounds, but I had a little different thought about this early on called accessory dwelling units, which don't require any land, and the buildings are already there, and the folks that live there can do it all on their own, and it's all workforce housing.
I'll agree with you. I had it all sent to council when AARP put that out, said that's the major wave of the America right now, the ADUs. A whole article. I had it sent to every council member of this council this year, or maybe last year, that we should look at that.
So, you interested in that?
I'm all about it, yeah. Does it
So?
require any kind of funding? Because this would be the time to talk about funding. If
Very little.
If that doesn't, then let's put that on the agenda next month. And in the meantime,
Rob, did you hear that?
can we put that on the agenda?
I think it's on Jennifer's list of projects to do and has been scheduled at a future point in time. She can speak to that if it's something that's been plugged in yet.
My future is 2 more meetings, 2 more sessions.
So let's talk about that.
No, wait.
Okay. Wait a minute, Elizabeth. We're on affordable housing, and we just turned down 8 one-bedroom units that we had awarded to Gorman. Okay. We awarded Gorman those 8 one-bedroom, one-bathroom units on Woods Avenue. Okay. And Habitat built 9. Okay. And Habitat normally doesn't do one bedroom. They don't do rentals, but they got the money. Okay, they got it. But you know what we did? We just turned them down.
I thought we approved that.
We did not. But now they don't have to because, Mark, you found out that they're a 501c3 and they don't even.
They're exempt. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Wait,
We have turned them down. We've turned them down twice.
We did vote to not reserve them. However, it was unnecessary because they don't have
You and Mark and Henry voted not. I voted no.
Yeah, the issue you guys are talking about, the Woods Avenue.
Yes, the 8 one-bedroom, one-bath units. Yep.
The vote was to reserve the units for village use. It wasn't to specify a specific location. It did not turn down habitat, but it wasn't specifically reserved for habitat or use at the Woods Avenue location. It was reserved for village use.
We didn't reserve the units
So that you
because
could use it for that.
They weren't required to.
Okay, but John, this is the second time they came back. The first time they were turned down because Elizabeth and Mark and Henry voted no because of hammock.
It was a vote to not reserve the units, correct?
Yes.
We voted to protect the hammock, not to deny them the right to do their project. We were happy to send it somewhere else where there was no hammock on a bigger piece with more units. Just to be clear, I'm not anti-habitat.
You and Henry and I were on it when we approved it for Gorman.
I remember.
I
remember.
don't understand it, man.
Gorman didn't come to the.
They didn't. Yeah, but Habitat was the default contractor, and Habitat. I thought didn't even have to come in here.
Wait.
Okay, but wait a minute, Mark. Wait a minute. But the problem was that the dwellings, those units expired, right? That was the whole problem.
There was a time limit as to how long they would be reserved for. So that lapsed, and that was the need to re-reserve.
So a very important distinction is that the Gorman Company is a for-profit company, and our code prohibits building affordable housing in a hammock by a for-profit company that has to go through BPAS.
I already had told them they could do it.
Well, I'm just saying it would have been prohibited by the code. So we would have been violating the law had we let them do that. When Habitat took over, they're not for profit, and they were not required to go through BPAS. So we had to go through that exercise to see that. And we did, and Habitat gets to build there. They get to build on a hammock where we're supposed to be protecting them. But if that's what the law says, that's what the law says.
I met with Habitat. I said, do something so I can approve your project. I can argue for you. Give me a reason. I met with them one-on-one. They never did. Truthfully, they never did. And Gorman, with that project in the middle of the city, thanks to Ken Phillipson, who's here tonight, I understand that Gorman paid the city like $1 million or something for the property. Just raise your hand, say yes, no, yes. Anyway, something like that. However, right now, they're taking in $600,000 a year, and our piece is $5,000. Did the $1 million or $2 million that they put up justify what they're doing at the property right now? I don't know. But all I know is we're getting $5,000 and they're getting 600 and some thousand. And when I challenged them, they said, well, we have expenses. So that's the in and outs of that conversation.
All right, Rob, you had something you want to say about getting on track?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone that we have a 6 o'clock deadline,
Yes.
and we're trying to get to the point of where we get a millage rate discussion going, but I also want to give council ample opportunity to inject new ideas and make requests that we can consider in the budget. But I'm concerned we're starting to run a little short on time, but maybe that concern is not, entirely accurate, but I'd like to see if we can refocus a little bit.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we going to move on, or we
Wait a
want to
minute.
keep?
No, I don't think we resolved that. And just to be clear, I'm taking this pretty seriously. And so while I respect that we are running out of time, we're spending millions of dollars. So the question that I brought up originally here was, do we want to think about any kind of allocations of funds for workforce housing that this village could support, considering how many allocations we have reserved for the town?
I'll go along with you.
Well, I'm willing to do what it takes to a limit, but the unfortunate reality is that you're going to do it privately without a subsidy. Somehow, the developer, whoever it is, will be upside down. You cannot build them and then rent them out and break even, let alone make a profit.
That is sort of what we're talking about. The subsidy would be potential.
Well, it could be the use of the land.
It could be anything.
Yeah.
But if we don't have money for that, we can't even begin the conversation of how to do this differently. We continue to say this isn't possible in our town because we're not approaching this with a different set of a different lens. So at what point are we having the conversation? And you know what? And problems are fixed with money. And we're talking about the budget. So are we thinking about solving our workforce issue in a new way, which means a new conversation, which potentially means a new funding stream?
You got to get creative, Elizabeth. It's not, we don't have to be competitive. There's
creative
home builders out there. Palatka, Florida, of all places, is building 700 workforce housings, okay?
So it can be done.
In East Palatka. It can be done. They are so much more, I mean, we're not poor by any means, but Palatka is known as one of the poorest, okay?
Well, and so this is the
Go ahead,
point.
come up, Jennifer.
This is the point. We're not asking tonight for us to figure out how to make this happen, but what I'm saying is that money pushed in the direction of this problem brings solutions. And what we'll be asking for is not for us to figure that out, that's not our expertise, but to fund the creative solution of a problem that we've always had.
But we need our staff to call some of these people and bring them in. There's people that'll put the money. If we give them the dirt.
Agree.
So
Totally
are you
agree.
saying, I mean, because we don't know
creative
the
funding source.
do we just put a line on the budget that says affordable housing fund? Is that what
and
we're
it's a
talking
legit.
about?
It's some. I think right now we have like $20 in ours. Oh, that's going to do nothing. But we create a funding source to feed an affordable housing fund, and then at some future point task our staff with coming back with some creative solutions. It's something we don't have that in front of us. We're not. There's no project out there, but we know it's a crisis.
Maybe we can ask the manager to give us some options of funding sources for that.
Okay, Mark, excuse me one second. Jennifer, would you go ahead,
Hi,
please?
sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your robust conversation, but thank you. I just wanted to casually remind everybody that several months ago, the council tasked the planning department with coming up with a plan for the affordable housing crisis in the village. So we've been working on that. We put that on our action plan that we presented to you several months ago. ADUs were part of that conversation. The timeline for that was to complete at the end of this calendar year. I know for some of you that is not helpful because you won't be here at the end of the year, but that's where we're at. You know, we are short-staffed. We have lost some staff recently, so we may have to relook at that timeline and push it out a little bit more. But we still are on task to complete that timeline, that report, and that will include some creative ideas, some options for funding, some different things. I think while this conversation is definitely needed and important, it may be a little premature until we come to you with that plan and those ideas. And I think maybe the next budget cycle is when we should be having the conversation about how we fund the affordable housing in the village. In the meantime, if somebody were to come and want to talk about a project, we're willing to have those conversations and be willing to listen and work with them. But I think the bigger overall arching conversation is better saved till next budget cycle.
So I would like to ask specifically with regard to accessory dwelling units, since those don't necessarily involve funding, is that something that you could present to the council, or we could move forward on that component of it, or would that be out of whack with the overall plan that you have? Because we need them now.
So we can. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of it right now. There's a little challenge with those in that they would require an allocation of which we don't have any. So I'm happy to have that conversation at a council meeting with the council and figure out if there's a way we could do that without an allocation. I've looked and I'm not sure there is, but we can certainly have that conversation.
Let me ask you something, Jennifer, because you've been really tasked with a monumental project, and especially with your recently lost. I mean, but I don't hear you saying that the task is not unimportant, right? I mean, right? I feel like you realize this is a big deal.
Yes.
And I'm going to just say one more time, and then I'm going to drop it. But and I'm trying to think of a way to say it so that we have a crisis. We have some limitations in our staff because of the overwhelming amount of other things that you do. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we should be proactive about addressing it. And if it means creating a funding pool, I mean, to hire someone additionally to work on this individually, like that could be an option. It might take things off your plate because you've got a million other things going on. You know, this is the time to do that. So when I hear, holy crap, let's wait till next year, well, I certainly respect that considering the rest of the things you have to do, that we've asked you to do. But I don't think that should take away from our responsibility to address this crisis. So that's it, done.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Okay. Okay, are we going to move on here to B, Rob?
I think if council is done with questions for departments.
Oh, I actually have one more question.
Okay, because the next one would be C, actually. I think this discussion has come out of B so far, right?
All right. So,
and so.
Let Elizabeth after.
Yeah, I have two more questions. One was about, you know, I remember one was from Vince, and he was talking about. I was unclear about what he was asking for the replacement of this Nunatrix. I'm not sure what it is. He's coming out, yeah.
Vince will be out momentarily.
Okay, in the meantime, my second question is, I remember last year we spent a lot of time talking about COLA, and I'm not hearing that conversation. Like, is it just built in that it's a 5%? Or, I mean, I remember being like under a spotlight, like being very, like that was a huge part of this conversation. Where is it?
Well, there's 5% built in there, 4 or 5 option.
So when do we have that conversation? Is that you're bringing that back or what?
Whatever you want.
Since we have Vince up, how about we settle that question first, and then we'll revisit this. I have an answer for you on that as well.
So the first thing, and you were talking about your security system is no longer supported, and you were.
We're replacing the Xi. It's called Xi, and that replicates all of our servers to a cloud. So that in the event of an emergency, like a hurricane or a fire in Village Hall, we can maintain our services. We could run everything from there within 2 hours. We are replacing that because that one's going away.
Okay.
So, and we found it was cheaper to buy new hardware, which we would have to replace in 3 years anyway, and use our own hardware to do the same thing. Over the long term, it's going to be considerably cheaper. So that's where we were with that. Because
we're not fixing an unsupported service.
No, that's going away. In May of next year, that service no longer exists. We're replacing it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and now on to the other question about the COLA. Yeah, as presented yesterday by Lisa, it assumed a 5% COLA increase for non-union personnel across the board. We talked a little bit about comparables and how the county was doing 3.4 plus 1.6 pursuant to a performance plan, and we discussed that we were very anxious to develop our own performance evaluation system and model that same type of approach where you have a base increase annually plus a performance-related increase that would, rise or fall according to one's ability to meet the goals that are established for a particular fiscal year. So I'm just saying all that to remind everyone that we had that conversation, and at that point we didn't have any questions on the 5, but this is certainly an opportunity to raise that as a question if you're desirous to, have council discuss it further.
Are we?
I'm not saying nothing, go ahead.
Hey, you know what? I'm just going to continue to bring my issues forward until they're done because I'm taking this seriously. So do we want to have a conversation about that? I didn't think we got, and forgive me, I know we had, yesterday's was a quick meeting. Could you direct me to the page where we had some comparisons for other COLA in our community?
I don't think you did that.
I think she spoke to that specifically. Is Jamie here? Yes, she's in the Okay.
I think it might be on tab 4. There were, I don't know if that's exactly what it is, but there is something about COLA and pay increases in there. There were 4 different folded ones. It's the last folded one.
But wasn't it in here as well? There was one of these that had it.
I think so. I don't have that though. So while we were waiting, I thought I would direct you to that.
tab 4-18, and it has an average of 34 municipalities surveyed. It has Monroe County, and she explained that Marathon had not yet responded back. And the
Here it is,
table,
right here.
Yeah, the
COLA
table-
pay and increase, COLA and pay increases.
Right.
So I think she was going to bring the list back of the counties or something. Is that what, maybe that didn't happen?
No, I don't think there was a request to follow up on it that I recall, and it's not in my notes here, so I may have missed it.
So Monroe County is doing 3.4 and everyone and then they have a merit and then it comes out to 5%.
Yes, the maximum increase in Monroe County would be 5% based on their COLA plus the merit of 1.6. And the survey that was done, average of 34 municipalities, had a maximum increase of 5.39% amongst those 34 that she had in the survey. And then the sheet also details what the implication is of a 4% versus 5%, net difference of $65,601 on the entire budget.
I don't have anything else on that.
Can you say that one more time? The short version.
The short version was that staff had proposed a 5% increase, and that was generally consistent with what was found in a survey of 34 municipalities, where their increased maximum was 5.39, and the counties of 5.0, which is a combination of performance and COLA. So 5% was pretty much equal to the maximums that were highlighted in that data.
Well, I'm certainly in agreement as to the performance evaluation. That's closer to the public sector. I don't know about the 5, quite frankly. But performance can raise up. I would rather start at a lower number, quite frankly.
In our environment, we would not be able to do a performance bonus on top of a COLA because we don't have a performance evaluation system in place yet. That would be for our next fiscal year. So if the preference is to be lower, just recognize it would be lower without the ability to add an increment to it for any individual's performance.
But I think in the interest of expediency, we could provide that performance evaluation, and we wouldn't have to wait till next year at the same time. I think we could do that. Well, the performance, we all know what the performance has been in the past. Let me ask you a question. Are we still under the 4-day work week?
No, I work 5 days a week, and my staff work 5 days a week. In fact, I'm here typically beyond my work hours instead of shorter days.
No, I'm not suggesting I'm talking about the staff in general.
Well, the staff in general do not have a 4-day work week. We work Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to
good.
5.
That's
right.
good to hear. I'm glad you said that. Okay. Thank you for that. Okay.
So I wanted to ask a question. This relates to the collective bargaining agreement we have, and it contains a clause in there, and I'm going to call it the most favored nation clause, such that the non-collective bargaining employees, such as the regular staff, I'll say, should they get an increase that is in excess of what is contained in that agreement, then that triggers the special clause, and then they meaning the union members, would also get that same amount. Am I correct to that?
Yes, and in fact, in the last collective bargaining agreement, the union members, and those would be firefighters, benefited
beyond that.
Beyond
yes.
what they had negotiated, right? I believe they negotiated in the 3s and ended up with increases that matched those that were granted to the balance of staff.
Exactly. So they I wouldn't say took advantage of that clause, but they benefited from that.
They did benefit from that clause, correct.
So if we pass this budget now, we're on the cusp of a new agreement. So if we do something now, would that impact an agreement in the future? Should it contain that clause?
Well, first of all, we are not making a decision now. We would be getting guidance to bring back to council on September 5th for a tentative budget. So if we set a particular increase for staff that are non-union, that would effectively set a baseline for the union personnel. So irrespective of what they negotiate for their upcoming contract, we would know that it would be no less than what we set for everybody else. Now, there's different levers we can press, right?
I understand what you're saying. Could you say,
Sure,
I don't know, is
Okay,
everyone
I'm
else
sorry,
following
I'm sorry.
this?
It's a little tricky. So, we.
Explain it to me.
Yes, it's simple. So we have the union employees in the fire department and rescue, and then we have the non-union employees. So in the collective bargaining agreement, which we're going to talk about later today, let's say that they have an annual step up in their increase of 3%. If we were to give 5% here, then they have a clause in their contract that says if they, the regular staff, get 5, then they get 5% also. So it's like, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, or however you would like to, characterize that.
So that's true. I'd like to avoid having in-depth conversation on that topic.
Exactly.
Because we're going to be having another discussion separately, but I will say there are different levers that we can press
Yes.
to balance that in an appropriate way.
Yes.
And we'll talk about some of that in an appropriate setting.
So we should have the conversation with the union prior to the conversation with the village.
Yes.
Yes.
But that may not necessarily happen. We should talk about this after, when we go into executive session.
No, I understand that, but I mean, we're going to be there in a half hour or something.
Right, but all I'm saying is there's different pathways that we could be walking, and we'll talk about all of them.
I'll
Yes.
save it for later, thank
Okay.
you. So
What's next?
Okay, so if we are done,
There, we're not focusing on workforce housing. Just wanted to say that.
We're doing what?
We're not dedicating funds to workforce housing because it's something that we're not prioritizing. Just to be clear. Okay, next.
Okay.
I said we're not prioritizing funding for workforce housing because we just don't prioritize it.
I think you worded that wrong. I think we're following what Jennifer wants, and she's the planning director.
I think that Jennifer's response was
Yeah.
appropriate in this circumstance, because if we were to want to develop a plan and fund it, the timing is such that that plan needs to be completed. We'd have to take some actions after that. So generally speaking, from a budgetary perspective, if we're looking, 9 months out into the fiscal year, we'd probably want to get that plan in place, know what the financial needs are, and feed that into the next budget cycle, which is not, I don't believe, the same as not prioritizing it, because council's made it very clear, and the community has made it very clear, that affordable and workforce housing are very high priorities. But having a defined plan to advance that and then fund it is a good practice, whereas if we set the money aside, we would be allocating funding perhaps to something we may not have any real ability to execute on this fiscal year, and taking that money away from things like maybe the discussion of how to balance the land acquisition fund, right? So they all interrelate is all.
I think we'll just agree to disagree with our understanding of this, but thank you, respectfully.
So Rob, help me. Are we going to be ready so we can take a break about 5:45 before we go into executive session?
It depends on how much time we need for the millage rate discussion, but we'd like to head right into that.
Okay, so let's go.
All right. I'll give a brief intro, and then Lisa's going to take it over. Each one of you are distributed this document here. It's up on the screen for members of the public that they would like to take a look at it. What you'll note there is we have a variety of millage rates that are listed on the left. As you walk through it, we have the resulting levy, that is how much cash we have available within our budget to meet our various funding needs. And the next column is the gap that's created. So with each millage point drop, we have to come up with more money from somewhere to make the budget balance. That could be cuts, it could be assigning fund balance, it could be a number of different levers that staff will work on based on council's direction as to which millage rate they want to be at. You look all the way over to the right, there's a column, 3 columns, with the header tax implications. So if you want to, say for instance, I'm at 2.850. If I go all the way across to the tax implications, I would know that if I agree to a millage rate of 2.850, that means I would be authorizing an increase of $66.35 per year on the median assessed home. And that example holds true for each of the different millage rates that are listed. You can go all the way over there and say, if you're interested in how does this affect the, the median homeowner, that column will tell you. If you want to know the cash difference, there's a column there that says that as well, change in levy. So with that having been said, that's the general layout of the document. Lisa, would you like to add anything else to that?
No, I think that about covers it. I did want to mention, though, at the bottom, and I understand about the hurricane response. I just had a couple of comments about that. I did talk with our CPA, and he did tell me that their recommendation is 25% of your expenditures, and we are at 40%. However, I do know that in the past, the reason I think that the 10 million was, or the 40% was chosen, from my understanding, it was because of Irma, and we had $10 million in debris removal, so right up front. So that might have, the Irma storm, which I don't guess there's been a big one like that in a while, but, and you're taking a risk. Whatever you're doing, you're taking a risk. But anyway, that my recommendation would be the 25%, but that's up to council what you think. And you've been here and lived here and seen what hurricanes have done and what the cost of them is. But I did want to just mention that. Okay, so our CPA said they recommended 25%. They did it for a city our size, he said, because I think as he stated that Monroe County had like 10 million in theirs, and we're doing the same as what their whole county is doing. So. Yeah, with 6,000 residents. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So just a recommendation. Okay, John?
I just wanted to remind everybody that by statute, there are certain voting requirements depending on what millage rate gets set, and it's based upon a calculation that's set forth in the statute. So anything up to 2.6736 would be a three-fifths simple majority vote of the council. Anything above that, up to 2.9410, would require 4/5 vote. And then anything above that number, 2.9410, would require 5 out of 5 to vote. So.
Okay, I think what we can do is go ahead and go through the capital items. If you guys wanted to look at the back of the number 13, those are all of the items that we've got in there. And I do have a couple of recommendations for some of the bigger ticket items. After Terry was speaking last night about the fire department and the engine that he needed, we did discuss, it's 1.2 million. And I did interrupt him yesterday asking him about if we could solidify that pricing for the next 2 years. And he said that we could if we signed a contract with him. His response was he just needs to get the ball rolling because, as he told you, it almost takes 4 years to get a build out on a fire engine. So, and that is true. I know that for a fact. And it could be longer the longer you wait. So it is good to go ahead and get in line, get your place. But my recommendation would be to wait those 2 years to pay for it. That way we don't have to come up with the money up front. Or as Rob stated, he had another idea of we could set aside maybe $400,000 a year in a sinking fund each year, or $300 for the 4 years, and that way we would have the money when the time comes to purchase it. So, how much could we save if we paid for it now? Do we have? That's Terry. Do you have an answer for that?
10% is the most we would save, so $120,000.
So how much? $120,000. Okay.
Over 4 years?
And we could take the money that, if we developed a sinking fund, we could invest that and get interest on it while that fund is sitting there waiting to buy the fire truck. So that's a consideration. Okay. All right. So 120, that's not that big a savings, but hey, it's 120,000.
Yeah, but we could make a lot of money.
We could make more in the interest by putting something. I understand. Okay. I'm good.
Plus, there may be a risk too. Not that fire manufacturers go out of business very often, but if you pay them in advance, you could be still holding the bag when it comes time to buy the vehicle if something happens.
Okay, and also on the pool renovation, I know that's something that really needs to be done, but that's $2 million as Maria has estimated that the cost for that. And I did talk to her about that. We can get TDC funds for that, and we will definitely apply for that. I think that comes up in January, so we won't really know until that point. And then they have to take all of their applications in and see what the pool of money, and then decide their rankings. So we did get $500,000 this year for the park playground at Founders Park. So, I don't know what the pot of money looks like each and every year. It could go up, it could go down, I guess, but that is a consideration. And that would cover 25% of it if we could get that much. So that's another, thing to think about. Let's see. So on the capital sheet, I've got all of the revenues and what those are based on. The local government discretionary sales tax is based on, the state gives us the revenue estimates each and every year, and those just came out, so that's based on the estimate by the state. Let's see, Stewardship Act grant, that's, Pete gave me those numbers for those grants, so that covers his canal restorations he's got there. In addition, for the fire rescue that we purchased this year, that was, Terry had that a couple meetings ago, I think. The fire rescue that was $380, he was able to get that. We did get a $190,000 appropriation. That money is expected to come in this fiscal year in the next couple weeks. And then we had the bricks and mortar grant. Those funds were spent there. And then interest and a little bit of miscellaneous revenue, but we don't really budget for that next year because we're not really sure what that'll be. All in all, we have transfer from the general fund. We do have to add the church building is included in that, the purchase for that this year. Let's see. And then we have the transfer from the impact fee funds. And then the expenditures on the next section that shows what the projected were for this year as well as what we're planning to spend next year. And just keep in mind that canal project is 2.1 and the 615, those are grants. Pete did, so we did have the funds up front for that, or we will get reimbursed. Oops, I'm sorry, tab 13.
13-2.
13, yes, 13.
What page within tab 13, please?
2, number 2.
2.
Uh-huh. And then we also will have the City View upgrades. Those are split between planning, building, and code. Those are being requested. IT, you can see their requests there. And let's see, fire rescues, those are listed if you want to look down the list of those. Like I said, the engine's included in that, so if we wanted to wait 2 years, we could take that out and go ahead and authorize the purchase, but pay for that in 2 years or develop the sinking fund. And let's see what else is big there. That just gives you in red, you will see under each capital section, those items in red are their specific requests as well as the dollar amount to the right. So if you want to see what those are all listed out. And if you have any questions for any of the staff, I'm sure they'd be glad to answer questions regarding that. So like Rob was saying, those are the millage rates we have up there. The proposed 3 is 3, and the midpoint is 2.7649, and then the rollback rate at 2.5297. So those are what you'll be determining, which scenario you'd like to pick based on. And then what we can do is put together the projects, if at your discretion, what you'd like us to have for the next year based on what the millage rate is.
So I just want to add one thing real quick. So as you look at the millage rates and you see that gap, which is one more column over, it's labeled financial gap from proposed rate 3.0. As we go down the millage rate, the gap gets bigger in terms of how much money we have to find in the budget somewhere. What that column does not presently include is the $3 million allocation that we're going to build in for property acquisition. So add $3 million to everything in that column as you start working your way down. And so, just to illustrate, if we were at 2.7649, the midpoint, it currently says the gap would be $1,485,000. Really, the gap currently, based on our conversation this evening, is $4.485 million. So we would need to, in order to achieve everything that's in the budget, find 4.485 million, either through cuts, through use of fund balance, or some other strategy that we would bring back to council. We're not expecting you to figure that out right now. We're expecting and needing for you to kind of settle on one of these things that you're comfortable with in terms of the tax impact on the residents for the services, equipment, and other things that our staff have did their presentations on and underscored the importance of. So the conversation from this point to the end of the meeting, which probably is the next 15, 20 minutes or so, is which one of these numbers do you gravitate towards? And once you're comfortable with that, we're going to take that information and go back to the drawing board and present a tentative budget that hits that target, and we'll recommend how to get there. And then council can agree or disagree or change it or what have you. You might even change your mind on the millage rate, since this is not a decision. This is guidance for the tentative budget. There's no vote today, although it was important to also note, if you're targeting a particular millage rate, just know you have to have 3, 4, or 5 out of 5 people, depending on where you're at in that range. And that becomes part of the calculus when you get into tentative budget. But most importantly, where do you guys want us to be? And we'll come back to you with recommendations that hit that target.
Council, any questions?
Oh, it's clear.
Okay, we all understand what John said, right, about...
You want a number?
We're looking for a millage rate number that corresponds to all of those things I just said, but one quick reference for me is, what's the impact on our community, our residents, the median taxpayer? And that column tells you, with each millage rate you pick, whether it's an increase or a decrease, and of what magnitude.
And Rob, to remind us, I recall you saying that for each 1/10 of a point, it's about 630,000, is that?
It's probably like 631, but yeah, we round it to 630.
So by way of an example, if we wanted to do a sinking fund on the fire truck and we funded, say, 300 instead of the full $1.2 million, then that would get us about 1/10 plus a little extra.
That's correct. And that's part of the calculus we would do behind the scenes that you're doing in advance for us right there live in the moment.
Live in the moment.
This doesn't include the fire pay.
This does not include, and we said that at the beginning, but it is worth noting, yes, because we kind of covered a lot of ground. This does not include any of the increases that we may contemplate pursuant to our collective bargaining agreement. And we'll talk about how that works as well.
Right. So if we were to, are we going to finish the collective bargaining agreement before or after we vote on the ultimate millage rate?
Well, that's a good question, because it depends in part on the other side of the bargaining table, right? So we'll get direction from council. Our collective bargaining agreement members all are hearing this conversation, so they know the struggles that we have in the budget, and they know that we need to have things to run our government. So we'll have our discussion in executive session. We will get negotiations guidance from council. We will return to the table to negotiate with our bargaining unit members, and hopefully we'll be able to strike a deal as quick as we can. They had initially indicated to us that they were interested in expediting an agreement, and our initial response was, well, then we're going to have to see some concessions, because it was a pretty high ask, but that's not unusual. People want to set themselves a high bar so that when they begin to drop back down to something that everyone agrees is reasonable, they hope, using that strategy, that they'll be higher than they would otherwise. But I think factually speaking, we want to make sure that they're compensated well enough so that we have retention, we have recruitment needs met, we have safe employees that have the equipment and the needs met. But at the same time, there's a lot of other needs, and we have to collectively, both as council, staff, community, and the labor unit, recognize how best to strike that balance. And hopefully, yeah, by the time we come back, we have something. But if we don't, then we'll keep working on it. And we'll have to have some assumptions built into our budget, that deal with that uncertainty. And I'd like to say affirmatively, we'll have it done. But really the only way to do that would be to concede everything they want. And then, yeah, I could have it done. But we're not there yet.
I understand that was a great explanation. Thank you.
Understand, Henry?
Yeah, as I spoke to earlier, we should cover that bridge first. Is that correct?
Yeah, why can't we do that?
One, because we don't control the other side of the bargaining negotiation. Our deadlines for the budget are statutory. They are set by the state. So we don't have a choice but to do our budget on the dates that we have to do them. We cannot force the bargaining unit to come to the table. What could happen is we could come to impasse, and it could go through this long process that resolves the disagreements between the village and the labor unit, and that could take us well into our fiscal year. And once that contract finally settles, there would be some retroactive liability typically, where you're paying back pay for increases that they get. So we don't control the collective bargaining piece. We are mandated by state law on the budget piece. Perhaps one will come before the other, and we would like to see that happen, but that is not what's driving the negotiation necessarily.
We're going into that meeting shortly to what?
This evening.
Right,
to get direction on what council believes is an appropriate financial limit for our negotiations.
Okay.
If nothing changed with the fire department, do we have these figures? If nothing changed with the fire department, not that that's going to be the case, but just to get a better idea of what.
This is if nothing changed with the fire department. What we're looking at, there is zero assumed increase for the fire department.
But they're included in here.
Their salary, yes, they're in there, but their increases are not.
Okay.
So the implications of their increases are not included here because of obvious reasons. Right.
Okay.
So is this the point where we start the poker game about what the millage rate is? Is that right?
I think so. Here we go.
Okay. Sharon, did you want to go first?
3, I would guess. Am I correct?
Close,
Yeah.
but I like higher rather than lower because we need a lot of things, but I'm open-minded.
Well, I'm lower than higher. I think the people in this town need a break.
Sure, Henry.
I do.
A short question of those of you who are joining us, especially as staff. How many of you live in Alamorada? Would you raise your hand? How many people live in Alamorada? I don't see anybody from the staff.
Sure, look at all the staff that lives in.
Oh, them.
Well, okay, I'm just kind of curious, because what we decide should be relevant to the people that live there, really. Because you're going to be paying the bills.
Hey, we're going to be paying the bill too. All of us sitting up here.
I know
paying
that,
the
but
bill too.
I wanted to know how many people live someplace else that.
Well, this isn't all the staff. This is just the head, so.
I know that.
Okay.
I know that. Okay.
I know you know that.
Just curious, that's all.
All right, so
Okay, somebody want to throw a?
I just said lower than higher in March.
Well, I tell you what, I'm going to go as low as possible. I went the lowest possible last year. I wanted to go a little bit more, and you wouldn't let me. And I'm going to continue doing that.
So go for it.
So what's the most important factor? And that's the people. The people that pay the taxes. You all got your trim notices, I suspect, by now. I suspect that everybody's paying more as far as the trim notices go. I can't help but revert back, and I've said it before, I said it years ago. I was standing behind a lady in Publix, and her kid reached for a bag of candy, and she says, "You have to put it back. We can't afford it." That registered with me. That same woman had to make a decision between the best can of peas and the cheapest can of peas. That's who we're dealing with. I want to eliminate that. And what are the two things we have to eliminate? Is taxes and insurance. Insurance is going sky high, and it's up to us to make the taxes as low as we can. And we'll still do the services. Last year, we had $2 million left over. $2 million. Where did it go? General funds. Why not? If we have to pull ourselves in, besides adding 2 more people to the staff, make it 1, make it none. Every organization, every company in this country does this every year. They don't keep adding. They make it more feasible for the consumer. That's my position. I'm going to go as low as I can, in due respect.
Which one, Henry? Go for it. Tell us what you're going to pick.
What?
2.5?
2.5, is that where I'm going?
2.6, 2.7?
Yes, 2.5 gets my attention. Well, that's where I want to be.
Can I ask you a question about it?
Sure.
So based upon the initial, my initial questions that, if this budget is written at 3 mils. So if we go to 2.5 and each tenth of a mil is worth $630,000, then that's about $3 million. Is that about right? 3.2-ish?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that should be about right. The numbers that are in the chart are 2.97, but there might be.
I did that in my head, and I was an English major, so. So, what do you want to cut to get there?
One other thing real quick, plus the 3 million for the.
Yes,
land
okay,
acquisition.
yes.
So it actually be 5.97.
Yes. So what do you want to cut to get there?
You want me to go everybody's?
We're going to do a percentage of each one? Is that what you're saying? Each department loses 10% or whatever the magic number is?
That could be the right way to do it, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody wanted something. And everybody wanted something that costs money. We're at a crossroads here right now where nobody can afford to live here. Nobody. Any entry-level person for employment definitely cannot afford to live here. We're struggling. You don't seem to understand that. You can't wait to spend the money. You have to make some cuts. And I'm trying to make a cut on the taxes. If I could do the insurance, I would. But that will mean something to somebody along the way. Sure, we have people worth a lot of money who could care less, but we also have a lower, in order to qualify for low income, that's anybody under, I think, $140,000. Is that low income? Think about what's going on here. I mean, I'm just taken back by the whole thing. I just am. Okay.
Can I say something in response?
Of course.
So I'm looking at the tax on the median home, and
On what?
on the on this sheet, it's on here. So Rob's got us here. The median price of a home. I never understand the difference between the median and the average, but somebody can explain that later. I think they're kind of close.
The median home in Alamorado is worth 1.3
So-
$1,306,000.
So everybody that this here is a millionaire, is that what that means? No, it doesn't mean that, but there's a lot of millionaires here. So if the median tax is going to be on the high number, $3,918 and change, and at your number, Henry, $3,300, it's about $615 a year, which in my very good math is about $51 a month. And, people spend more than that. I said on potato chips, maybe it would be like potato chips with some almonds or something like that. But I'm making a silly joke, but $51 a month when the work that we do and the services that we provide increase the value of their home. I mean, yeah, they pay more in taxes each month if we did it at 3 mils, but they got a lot more valuable home in part because of what we do here. You have to weigh that. If we do less, then logic tells you maybe that value doesn't go up as much. So I'm just throwing that out there for consideration.
So Henry, I like what you're doing. I like it. But I think, but if we go, that's a 9.63 decrease at the 2.5297. Why don't we go to 2.6 or 2.650? That's still a 5.33% decrease. I'll split it with you.
I'll say no.
Rob, can you, if we come up with a range, a narrow range, can you bring back multiple scenarios for a range?
What do you think?
So that we don't have to land on a number tonight?
I think that having a number would be a good thing because we're coming back for a tentative budget hearing. So in theory, we would like to present one budget, not multiple ones. And how we balance each of them might vary a little bit, maybe not. We could try, but ideally we'd have one number.
But you could come back with a range.
We could, or we could come back with, if you guys can settle on one number, we can present a tentative budget to you with that number. And then you would see what the impacts are, and you would either say, yes, this is fine, or no, let's have a live discussion here, and we would be able to calculate it out by adding something back that we're taking away or reallocating it. But ideally, we'd have a pretty narrow, if we get a band, it would be a pretty narrow one.
Would that change happen in the meeting?
Yeah, it in theory could. It depends on how big of a shift it is, right? But yes.
Well, since we've had such...
No. Before you do that, Elizabeth, how do you feel? Because there's some of us who are aligned.
What you want to say, Henry?
I've agreed to 2.650.
Okay.
We're at 2.79.
I'll go along with that, Henry.
2.650. We got 2 votes. Do we have 3?
Yep.
We have 3. Thank you very much. Let's move on.
Can I ask where you're going to cut that from?
I'd start with, like I said, looking at the 3 million going into a piece of property that's overpriced. I know that's not for that property, but in my brain it is. And then I think each department could shave a little bit. I mean, listen, the taxpayers, this is a great, wonderful place, and we look very wealthy, but there's a lot of people who aren't doing very well and who struggle. And I know that for fact, and I just think we need to give the taxpayers a break. We're put up here to do what's best for the community, not what's best for certain people. And I think we need to give the taxpayers a break. That's just my opinion. Everybody has theirs. Elizabeth, you haven't chimed in yet.
Oh, you got 3. You guys had an offline conversation and got 3. So
wasn't offline.
We don't have a.
It wasn't offline.
You got 3.
It was right in front of us, but they pretty much.
I proposed I'd meet him halfway.
They've already cooked the goose. It's time to move on.
Hey, you and Elizabeth have signed.
We did. This is the poker I was talking about.
Those 3 votes passed. They're not.
If we are voting on, which we're not voting on today, obviously there are budget hearings that we have to hold in September, but a 2.650 would require 3 votes.
Okay, we got it. Thank you very much. Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Well, wait a minute. I mean, does Mark and Elizabeth want to put anything?
Oh, I mean, you can.
I could tell you,
Where would you
theoretically,
come
I
in?
could go along with 2.650, and it's not so much what you cut from the budget, but what do we do with the overall parts of the budget to reach the goals that we're trying to achieve. And as Rob was talking about at the beginning of the meeting, there are these other funds that we can look to draw from or draw down from, which is not good long-term, as he explained. And in some cases it can work, in some cases it's not. But I really think that we're not doing the full service of the right way to do this if we just start with a number and say, well, we're not going to go beyond that. We really need to look at all of the needs, because it's cutting off your nose in spite of your face.
Mark,
But
did Lisa just say that our CPA said we have 40% in hurricane fund, okay?
So-
I know 10 million is not a lot of money to have in a bad hurricane, but he said 25% and we have 40%. Okay?
I'm aware of that, and this has come up multiple times. And here's my standard response. That's from a mainlander that doesn't live in the most hurricane-prone country in the nation. And we have a little bit different risk
I
here.
understand, Mark. I was born and raised right here. in
Yes, you do.
Mississippi.
You more than anyone understand that. So this is one of those times where the rules on the mainland don't always work for our best interest down here.
Family lost 39 family members in the 35 storm. Yep. So, okay. Okay, so what do we need to do?
Here's the thing, you guys, you voted 3, so that's
We didn't
fine.
vote. We're just saying we could agree to go along with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no final decision here. We have an opportunity to
Come
change
back
it
on the
again.
5th and vote at the budget hearing. So,
Whatever. Let's move on.
every year I want to try to do what's right and try to lower, because all of us, I mean, I see my taxes and I'm like, if you own a home or two, the second home, and you're not homesteaded, man, the taxes go up like,
Okay, you know what, I will, since you did ask my opinion, yeah, I think we should go back and revisit the workforce housing issue and take it to 3, because, we're pretending like we're doing the best thing for the community, and I'm not sure if we are. I think that we have we could spend more time on this. We could have a more thorough conversation. And hey, you know what? You did ask. I know you're sorry that you asked.
don't forget, we were going to take a break at 1:45 and we're still.
Wait, but you asked me, right? You asked me.
I did.
So,
You both said, throw your 2
yeah,
cents in.
so I think that we should have a more thorough conversation about real needs of this community and then look at these numbers.
No, we've been looking at these and we had to make a decision, and I just felt like I agree with Henry, and I have every year since he on 20 trying to get him down, and it just seems like for one reason or another, and there's a lot of other cities that I've seen in Florida that have lowered they did a rollback, I understand we're in Alamorada, Florida, and there's a lot of wealthy people that live here, but there's also a lot of people that are struggling here, so.
And they live in workforce housing, which we don't have. But let's move on,
What amazes me is that you can't, sorry for the reference, there's an expression, you can't sling a dead cat in this town without hitting a millionaire. This is the wealthiest place other than Ocean Reef and Manalapan that I've ever been to.
But it's not everybody.
It's not everybody. And so and that's the point, when you make some of these cuts, you're affecting the people that you're trying to protect, and me too. So it's not an across-the-board even thing.
I think St. John's has exceeded Naples as the per capita income.
I don't know. Sometimes I make up statistics when it comes to talking about taxes because it's all BS in the end.
I tell you what, I was the highest employer in the county for a number of years. And you know what? Everybody lived here. Everybody could afford to live here. Nobody came from Homestead. Things have changed. The culture of this city has changed. There's no question about it.
All right, so are we okay? We're going to take a break now before our 6 o'clock in. Okay, oh, that's right, Van. Thank you very much.
I wasn't Van.
It was, oh, I thought, okay. I'm just assuming it's Van. Okay, let's, Marnie, can we open public comment up here? And staff, as far as, I think, Rob, are we okay to let staff at this point? Yeah. Okay, all right. Public comment is now open. Marnie, who's first?
First is Joe Wishmeyer.
Okay.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak here towards the end of this meeting. A couple things I would like to point out. One thing that I didn't see up on this chart was on the proposed budget is $24,403,000. The revenue at 3 mills would be $27,837. So therefore, this resulting levy is actually the money that's going to be in the general fund. So even if you went down to the rollback rate, there would still be money going into the fund. So the revenue at the rollback rate is $24,867,000, which is still more than what the actual budget would be. So I would hope that you would keep that in consideration when you're figuring your final millage rate. The last thing I'd like to talk about is affordable housing gets tossed around all the time. Now, maybe it's just me, but I think there's a big difference between affordable housing and workforce housing. Workforce housing to me means you need like apartment buildings or something that a bartender or a waitress can afford. They can't afford a $600,000, $700,000 house or $1.3 million, as it says up here. So when you're considering this, I really wish you would define, and instead of saying affordable housing, I wish you would start saying workforce housing and make it affordable for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Who's next, Marnie?
Van Cadenhead.
Oh, I knew he was going to be in there.
In there like swimwear, brother. I'm Van Cadenhead from Islamorada, and to follow behind Mr. Wishmeyer, we bought a piece of property that used to be the Irene's and George's and Island Silver and Spice, and we know that we could possibly build 17 units of workforce housing there. Mr. Pender pointed out that we have had a deal with Habitat for Humanity for 811s. They had the money, they had the momentum, they were ready to rock and roll, and we sat around and hypothesized and theorized and philosophized that away. Now, I think we should definitely work and we were promised when we spent $2.75 million for that property for Irene's and George's, that we would have charrettes, we would have public workshops, we would have a discussion of the people who provided that $2.75 million. And all this time after the purchase, we've not had one discussion of what's going to happen there. It's turned into a storage yard for the pipeline. So I would urge that we would do that. And I appreciate Mrs. Jolin's comments about never moving on workforce housing. And to follow up also on the presentation we had yesterday about the renovation of the pool. Now, the pool has never been emptied since it was built, as far as I know. And it seems like Ms. Mahoney has an in with the water company, and they don't know what to do with all that water. Well, we're building the pipeline. Why can't we have them drain the pool into those water trucks and use it to keep the dust down while they're building the pipeline? Let's get our money for our not waste the water, because they're using potable water that we need just to keep the dust down and save the dolphins. So I would urge that when you have the renovation of the pool, that you would establish, that was never done to begin with, a pool vacuum system. We have no pool vacuum system. Most pools have it. You have they go in the side of the pool. You can keep the pool clean with a vacuum. You can have the lifeguards that aren't working saving lives. They can be cleaning the pool and vacuuming and keeping it nice. Because now, at this point, one of the reasons that we have such a bad looking pool as far as algae growth goes is because it's not being cleaned. There's black algae in there, there's green algae on the side, and it's not a healthy environment. I mean, you can keep adding chemicals all day long, and it's not going to kill that algae. So those 2 points I would like to make. I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I wish you luck. And also urge rollback. Thank you, Henry.
Marnie, any other public comment?
Yep, Deb Gillis, followed by Don Horton.
Deb Gillis, Islamorada. Thank you for putting this at the end of the meeting. I wasn't able to come early. So first, I want to spend a couple minutes on the Hurricane Fund, the 25 versus 40. We are a different area than the rest of the state. It is, I know we're matching what the county did, but when we had that hurricane, and it is the last major hurricane that we had was Irma, that money that we had set aside put this town back in business very quickly or reasonably quickly. And it is a proven fact. The longer businesses are out of business because of storms, because of floods, because of whatever, the less chance that they have to come back and be a viable business. So it's important that you do keep that money. I know it's a lot of money sitting in that account, but it paid off. And I sat on those councils, and yeah, we had a lot of push from people saying, well, you got a lot of money there. I'll tell you, the 6 months after that, they were saying, I'm so glad you had a lot of money sitting there, because it made a difference on who we got in here to clean up and do whatever. Struggles of affordable housing. Yes, we need to move ahead with stuff, but we also need to look at cutting the costs of the economy, I guess, around here. Maybe an economic committee of some sort to help chase certain companies to come into this town. Part of the problem of the lower income people is that there's no good place for them to buy stuff here in town. They have to go all the way to the mainland to get stuff. We need, I don't know who we get, but we need like a little department store is what we need. But that's part of the problem. I mean, I know Dollar Tree wasn't the most favorite place of everybody, but there was a lot of people that are on that lower end that they use that because they could go in there and get a $1.25 meal. They could actually do that. We did have merit raises in our budget a couple years ago, a couple managers ago, I'm going to say. I think it's fallen through the cracks over the years, and it probably wasn't even that long years ago. It was a number of managers ago. So I'm glad to hear that coming back. 5% raise would be really nice on my income too, thank you. Affordable housing projects. We've delayed and delayed and delayed some. There's a couple projects coming forward very quickly that people are going, well, I don't know, it might create traffic. We have to decide what we want to do with this stuff. Yes, sir, I'm working on that.
Thank you.
And Don Horton.
Don Horton, 47 Schooner Bay. You know, I had a council person tell me 4 years ago, look, if we don't use the money that we're collecting because we had a pretty good increase 4 years ago, that we just give it back. And I still hadn't seen that. Thank God he's not sitting up here right now, too. Look, I agree that staff needs to get ahead. They work hard for us. They're good staff. Just getting a COLA raise and staying even, especially with Bidenomics, isn't getting anybody anywhere. You saw the raise of hands. They can't afford to live in Islamorada. I'm sure they'd love to live right down the street from here instead of wherever they live. Look, I'm not going to ask you to specifically what millage rate you should drop to. Rollover seems to be a little bit too low. But certainly we need to, I don't think we need to be at 40%. There's dollars out there. I think we need to start looking elsewhere for dollars, and I think that there's resiliency dollars and there's other dollars that are at the state that we need to start pushing for. We need to start looking other ways to spend, you know, our money out there rather than taxpayer money, because it raises the rent. You know, it's the homeowner, but it's not just the homeowner. It's the folks that pay rent too. Those that don't pay rent, it doesn't matter to them. You know, don't sometimes understand why they get upset about it. But I think that we probably should start looking at lowering that 40% and maybe finding that middle ground that you and Henry and Sharon are looking at. So thanks.
Thank you, Don. Marnie, anybody else? Anybody on Zoom or
Let me
anything?
double check Zoom, but I don't believe so. Nope, no one on Zoom.
No one else? Public comment is now closed, unless there's anybody else in this room that wants to speak. No takers? All right. Public comment is now closed. All right. Do I hear an adjournment for this so we can take a break? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, staff, for being diligent for yesterday and today.